There comes a time for everyone when you will be able to attend such a significant event as an entrance exam. This moment has come for applicants to the Valkyrie State School. Every year, a qualifying exam is held here to select as many of the best students as possible. Their first test will be to destroy goblins, and they should also remember that the exam is broadcast live so that everyone can vote for their favorite. Their future practically depends on their results in this exam, so they need to make every effort to get the highest score and get into the best class. Of course, there were many talented guys who exuded destructive power. There were also those whose specialization was martial arts, and their elegant fighting style captivated the audience. And among them, there were those who possessed both martial arts and destructive power, looking quite impressive against their background. Oddly enough, there is a hierarchy of power within the academy, and the strong tend to easily gain fame and wealth. But for the weak, it's the opposite. That's what happened to our protagonist, young Asahi Hinata. He was so weak and clumsy that he couldn't even fight off low-ranking goblins. Weaklings like him were of little value, but he was different from them. He was distinguished by an astonishing weakness. He was not even able to lift a branch to somehow fight off the monsters. And all this is because of his special suit, which he received as a personal artifact. Therefore, in such a situation, all he could do was endure the goblins' attacks. But he was so stubborn that at some point he decided to take off his suit and fight without it. It was quite reckless, and the spectators were beside themselves with amazement when they saw it. His disgrace was broadcast across the country, and that was enough to land him in the lowest class. From that day on, his terrible school life began. All of this might not have happened if at one moment unknown monsters had not entered the world. In just a couple of years, they managed to wreak havoc across the entire planet, and conventional weapons proved ineffective against them. Therefore, for many, the only way out was to come to terms with their fate. However, people received hope in the form of sacred artifacts. People learned to embody weapons from their own souls, with the help of which they were able to resist monsters. Hinata's father was a hero who used a shield, and the boy dreamed of becoming just like him. But one day, his whole life changed again when his father was fighting monsters. They were cornered, and his father told his son to grab his friend and run to safety. His father considered him strong and was confident that the boy would be able to protect everyone. As a small child, Hinata wasn't particularly inspired by his words. After all, watching your father on the brink of death isn't the best picture of childhood. And yet he trusted his father, took Shizuku's hand as she tried to pull his mother out from under the rubble, and together they ran away. Since then, Hinata began training to become strong and protect the people dear to him. His father's words were deeply imprinted in his memory and became fuel for his motivation. But after studying for 6 months at an elite school for warriors, the young man realized something. In this life, not everyone gets what they want through long efforts and training. There are those who are given it from birth. Therefore, such people often despised those who were weaker than them. That's what happened to Hinata. A man without a hint of talent became a social outcast. No matter what kind of person he really was, in the eyes of others, he was just a weak half-hero. None of the other students wanted to even talk to him, let alone be friends. School became a living hell for Hinata. Even, it would seem, a friend whom he had known since early childhood and whom he had once saved. Despite all this, I no longer noticed him and ignored him in every possible way. That day, Shizuku also lost a loved one, and until they entered school, they remained friends, going through all the difficulties together. But after entering the academy, everything changed dramatically for the worse. And this was not surprising, because Shizuku is an excellent student who possesses a powerful artifact, while Hinata was a mere loser with a costumed artifact in comparison. Over time, he became accustomed to the contemptuous looks and similar attitudes towards himself. Even after returning to class, he couldn't rest peacefully or prepare for the lesson. Unfriendly friends were already waiting for him there. The others ignored everything that happened to Hinata. Anyone with a low power level and a weak artifact ended up in Class E, just like him. Such students, as a rule, had no motivation, and their teachers had long since given up on them. Simply put, Class E was considered the real trash bin of the school. And at its center was Hinata, who was being beaten daily by Takayuki Kurimura. The use of artifacts was only allowed in specially designated areas, but students in this class did not care about school rules, so Kurimura, possessing the gloves artifact, used it to beat up Hinata. Even in a class as low as E, Hinata was at the very bottom. 6 months had passed, and his life was getting worse. Some students tried to stop Kurimura, but it was no use. After all, he was the most ordinary bully at school who, having chosen a target, never left it. Of course, the other students were curious as to why Kurimura was targeting him. The thing is, it was because of him that Hinata ended up in Class E. After the Goblin test, a mock battle took place, and Hinata became his opponent. He stubbornly refused to give in and held Kurimura in an iron grip. As a result, both received low grades and ended up in the lowest class. Hinata's determination and unwillingness to give up eventually turned against him. But even in this situation, he continued to smile, looking his opponent straight in the eyes. Kurimura even more, driving him to the point of fury. Despite this, Hinata benefited from the constant beatings, all because of his artifact. The thing is that his artifact is a kind of shield, and in order to upgrade its abilities, he had to take damage. All these 6 months he endured bullying from Kurimura, so that one day he could become stronger and take revenge. Kurimura allowed himself to say unnecessary things. For example, about Hinata's parents, hinting that if artifacts are passed down through inheritance, then his parents were also worthless owners of useless artifacts. He also added that he wanted to meet them and beat them up like he had been. These words deeply hurt Hinata, but he still couldn't do anything in response. No matter how strong his desire to hit the offender was, he still couldn't allow himself to do so. Even when someone tried to object to Kurimura, he quickly put them in their place. That was Hagane. Shu. Therefore, other students also had to endure humiliation and follow his orders. So one day, Kurimura ordered Shu to take a chair and hit Hinata as a proof of loyalty. He followed the order without a second thought, hitting Hinata on the head with all his strength. Although deep down, he didn't want to do this. This blow turned out to be for Hinata 10th, which revealed new features of the artifact for him. But Hinata didn't know about this yet, because he still couldn't fully understand his artifact. He considered himself too weak, because even after training, his efforts did not bear fruit. However, at one point, everything changed for the better for him. Hinata was able to level up his artifact as a reward for the damage he took. His weakling suit became Indomitable suit. Before this, the young man believed that since his efforts were not being rewarded, it meant he had to continue to the end. Thanks to his perseverance, he was finally able to receive the award and get closer to his goal. 6 months ago, he learned about some of the features of his suit. His performance on the entrance exam was terrible, and if he had not done something about it, he would have been expelled. After all, Valkyrie is a school that relies on taxes from residents. It is therefore not surprising that if a student does not show potential, he is expelled. Without government support, such students become nothing, just like Hinata. But he wasn't about to give up. He found a way to improve his artifact. It was known that constant use of the artifact would strengthen it over time. But back then, Hinata didn't yet understand what abilities his suit had. If the suit is truly of no use, he will remain a weakling. Now he couldn't afford to give up. He had to fight to become stronger. In words, everything looked simple and motivating, but in reality, it was much more complicated. Hinata still couldn't defeat even a single goblin, but he didn't despair. He remembered that people used to fight monsters with firearms, but now they had to do it barehanded. He considered taking off his suit and fighting with a stick, but then the artifact would be useless, and he needed to deal damage while still wearing the suit. Then he remembered that if he touched an object he couldn't use, he was hit by a powerful energy pulse, from which his suit protected him. Hinata decided to turn this weakness into his advantage, and he succeeded. The pain was unbearable, but he managed to kill his first goblin. While the other students were dealing with hordes of goblins, Hinata barely managed to defeat one. It was a shame. Nevertheless, he succeeded, and the monster dropped his first magic crystal. The young man even thought he'd drop dead right there, so he didn't want to use that technique again. But after so much effort, he got the crystal, and as soon as he picked it up, it disappeared. Instead, a system window appeared with a message that he had successfully absorbed the magic stone. The system was updated, and a new task appeared: to receive 10,000 damage. 6 months have passed since then, and now the moment has come when Hinata was able to improve his suit. But he didn't understand how to do it. Looking through the system parameters, he found that the suit could be controlled by voice, and the keyword for upgrading was upgrade. Hinata said the long-awaited word, and his suit immediately began to change. Now, it was not the wimpy kid costume, but the Indomitable costume, which differed from the previous one not only in appearance. Hinata was surprised, as he had never heard of an artifact that could change its appearance before. and he wanted to know what changes had occurred in its abilities. A window with characteristics appeared on the screen, but the strength indicators, 14, and endurance, 18, did not make him too happy. But the new suit gave him incredible strength and protection. However, he wanted to try out the new suit, and where else to do it if not in a portal with monsters? His opponents were still the same goblins, but now Hinata was confident that he could defeat them. Shizuku was there too. While killing one goblin was already an achievement for Hinata, for her, they weren't even suitable for a warm-up. However, she was very surprised to see Hinata, who also came to train. Next to her was her friend and classmate Sachi, Shirahane. She asked what Shizuku saw there. The girl replied that it was nothing, just an empty space, so there was no need to worry. And yet, Sachi noticed Hinata, noting that this was the same guy who had caused the exam broadcast to be interrupted. But Shizuku didn't appreciate her humor, saying that if she enjoyed making fun of people so much, she should quit school and become a clown. Sachi asked why she was so angry, but Shizuku replied that she wasn't angry at all. She was just irritated. Hinata's stubbornness irritated her. Everything has its limits, so why didn't he get it? However, Sachi still didn't understand why Shizuku hated him so much. She only noted that his outfit seemed to have changed since the exam. Meanwhile, the young man continued training. This time, he managed to hold off the goblin's attack. The suit's defenses had truly increased, and although he took damage, it didn't stop him from trying to counterattack. But in reality, everything turned out differently. The goblin easily knocked him down, pressing his face into the ground. Hinata was disappointed. His plan hadn't worked. He withstood the blows, but couldn't defeat his opponent. He wondered if he should try the same move again as the first time. Suddenly, the goblins began cloning themselves, and when he tried to escape, they immediately caught up with him. Hinata hoped someone would save him, but then he remembered his father's words. In a critical situation, it's useless to ask for help. You need to rely only on yourself. He needs to be strong, to become a hero who can save others in difficult times. Hinata wanted to become. But if he dies now, at the hands of low-ranking monsters, his dream will end. So, despite his fear and doubts, he decided to use the painful technique again. Thanks to this, he managed to buy some time to run away and come up with a new plan. The only problem was that he couldn't use this technique again. But it looked like he wouldn't need to this time. A message appeared in the system window. The suit responded to his will and opened a new skill. Revenge, activated by a keyword. Hinata didn't have time to think. He immediately decided to activate it. As soon as he said the key word, he felt his body begin to change dramatically. He felt a surge of power and without hesitation, struck the monster. Then, without stopping, he rushed at the rest of the crowd of goblins to destroy them all. Hinata had to act quickly and thoughtfully because the skill only lasted 10 seconds. However, in this short time, he managed to defeat all the goblins. But this ability had another drawback. In addition to the limited time of use and long cooldown, such a pace greatly exhausted the body. However, this could become his trump card in critical situations, albeit once a day and subject to damage received. In the future, he will have to constantly use this ability, but he will not be able to take damage forever. Besides, Hinata still didn't know the full capabilities of his artifact. The suit's transformation felt like an upgrade, and he could feel its characteristics changing. He wondered, if this was a feature of his artifact, perhaps it really would become stronger in the future. Meanwhile, another goblin dropped a magic crystal. By absorbing it, he unlocked a new feature of the suit, a list of upgrades that allowed him to become even stronger. After a short rest, Hinata returned to training, continuing to attack the goblins. Now he no longer had to use painful tactics to defeat them. Thanks to the new upgrades and abilities of the suit, he became stronger. He finally managed to defeat the hobgoblin and get the crystal from him. Now Hinata could use the hobgoblin's club without fear of the energy pulse. As a reward for his victory, he received permission to equip a weapon, unlocked the skills Impact Resistance and Clothing Adaptation, and also upgraded his main stats. Hinata noticed that his artifact had improved significantly after so many upgrades. However, the only thing that had improved the most was his stamina. He also had a list of tasks available to him that he could use to gradually strengthen his suit. Typically, the tasks revolved around killing goblins, and various bonuses were awarded for completing them. Hinata may need to upgrade her suit again to gain more skills. However, he still didn't fully understand how exactly this could be done. Perhaps some kind of trigger was needed. After all, when he learned the Vengeance skill, he was given a list of upgrades, even though it wasn't available. Perhaps this is how he represents his suit's upgrade. Maybe it happened when Hinata first absorbed the magic crystal, but it was written differently back then. Back then, the suit's owner's incredible will was mentioned. Hinata still had a lot to think about. But the next day, he went to the hospital to visit his sister and mother. Hinata's younger sister Hikari was also injured during the monster attack and underwent rehabilitation. According to Hikari, she is already doing much better and will soon be discharged from the hospital. From the outside, it really seemed like everything was fine with her, and this made Hinata happy. However, the same could not be said about their mother, who suffered the most. She had been unconscious for over 10 years due to crystal disease. The disease is caused by the poison of a certain monster, and the saddest thing is that there is still no antidote. Hikari was also infected with the crystal poison, but thanks to her mother, she only received a small dose, so unlike her, she's recovering. If all goes well, she'll be discharged next year. But there was still one serious problem. A man named Kagura Ginji. He led the Phoenix Guild, which fought monsters. Hikari didn't know who he really was, so she treated him with kindness. At first glance, you couldn't tell that he was a villain or anything like that. Not only did he always smile, but he also brought various gifts for young Hikari. However, Hinata knew very well what kind of person this person really was, but he didn't want to tell Hikari about it. Ginji asked him to step outside for a minute to discuss their previous conversation. He began to talk about how supporting his younger sister, who would not recover soon, and caring for his sick mother was a heavy burden that required a lot of money. Hinata's father was once also a member of his guild, but Ginji was only pretending to be kind. In reality, he was a true scoundrel. The fact is, crystals obtained from patients with serious illnesses possess the same properties as magical crystals. Magic crystals are sources of new energy, and they can be extracted from the human body. Therefore, patients with crystal disease are sold at high prices under the guise of research. Ginji had wanted to take his mother's body, ostensibly to treat her illness, but in reality, that wasn't the case. So Hinata refused. However, even after this, Ginji did not back down and continued to talk about money, reminding that there was almost nothing left of his father's savings, and the hospital bills still needed to be paid. Hinata himself understood this perfectly well, without any reminders. Ginji noted that Hinata's artifact was of the lowest rank, and it was unlikely that he would be able to earn enough with it to provide for the entire family. Despite this, Hinata did not back down from his decision and firmly stated that he would protect his family no matter what, because that was his father's last wish, and he would do everything to ensure that his father was not disappointed in him. Hinata asked him not to tell Hikari about their conversation, and Ginji didn't object. He didn't want her to hate him too. Ginji admitted defeat and left. But at the end, he told Hinata that if he changed his mind, he could always turn to him. Returning to the room, Hikari curiously asked what they had talked about, but Hinata only replied that it was a secret. He understood that in order to protect his family and fulfill his promise, he needed to join the guild and earn a lot of money. Hinata needed to become stronger, much stronger. And as always, the school's monster portal, which would soon open again, would help him with this. He didn't have to waste a minute. But on his way to school, he heard strange screams. They came from around the corner and seemed to belong to his classmate, but Hinata decided to ignore it. It really was a girl from his school. Akane Yamura, however, passed by. Hinata decided that it was not his problem, and there was no point in interfering with it. Meanwhile, the guys continued to pester the girl, ignoring her requests to leave her alone. The guys were somewhat similar to Kurimura, the same hooligans, but at the same time, they offered her money in exchange for payment with their bodies. Akane continued to resist, saying that it was some kind of misunderstanding and they were confusing her with someone else. But one of the guys said that he knew her secret. After that, they began to threaten that if she did not agree to go with them, the whole school would find out about her so-called secret. They continued to assure her that nothing would happen to her and that they would pay for it. But Akane was against it. In response to his insolence, she responded rudely and spat right in the offender's face. She told him to go to hell with his proposals. This turn of events surprised the boys and made them even more angry. One of them grabbed her and started saying that in fact, no one needed her, that even her own family had sold her. But Akane rejected his words, stating that she still had dignity. When the offender tried to grab her again, his hand was suddenly intercepted by Hinata. It seems he still couldn't ignore the situation and decided to help Akane. The guy didn't immediately recognize Hinata and asked if they happened to go to the same school. But the girls who were with them immediately answered that this was the same Hinata, a weakling from Class E with the worst artifact. Hearing this, the guy also remembered him, recalling how he had disgraced himself on live television. The boys told Hinata to leave quietly, as they had business with Akane, and it would be better for him not to interfere. But Hinata replied that this would not happen. This enraged the boy even more, and he lunged at Hinata with his fists. Akane didn't understand why Hinata had intervened, since these guys were from Class C, and he was unlikely to be able to stand up to them. However, Hinata thought differently and managed to hit the offender first. He easily knocked him to the ground and hit him hard in the back with his elbow. Akane was stunned. It turned out Hinata was actually much stronger than he appeared. She had no idea he was hiding anything. His resilience and hidden potential surprised not only her. Even Shizuku, who was superior to him in everything, trained in all her free time. Unlike Hinata, she was much faster, stronger, but she didn't have what he had. Despite the fact that her skills were recognized by everyone, even teachers, Teacher Takashi praised her for her hard work and speed in learning taijutsu. However, Shizuku said that she was still not strong enough, because there was someone stronger. Takashi was surprised to hear this and asked again if there really was anyone stronger at her age. Shizuku confidently confirmed it. She added that due to her poor choice of target, taijutsu became her only option. Akane couldn't stop being surprised. After all, she considered Hinata a weakling, incapable of even dealing with Kurimura, and now he was easily dealing with the guys from Class C. It seemed like such a fight was a walk in the park for him. One of the guys tried to sneak up from behind. He even managed to grab Hinata, but he easily fought him off. And then he knocked down his opponent with a powerful blow, as if nothing had happened. Hinata managed to defeat all of the Class C bullies without sustaining any serious injuries. This stunned Akane. She thought he was just a weakling, but it turned out to be the opposite. He defeated them even without the artifact. Akane began to wonder if he really was that strong. One of the boys tried to get up, but Hinata was expecting it. However, this was a diversionary tactic so that the other guy could get the artifact despite the ban. He fired straight at Hinata, but in the last seconds he managed to react and block the shot with his hands. However, the blow was so powerful that it threw him back a couple of meters. Hinata was surprised. He felt no pain. Perhaps his opponent was weaker than expected. Passers-by reacted to the shot, already preparing to call the police for using the artifact. The boys realized that the situation was getting out of control and decided to run away, promising that this was not the end. Hinata was still processing what had happened. Akane approached him worriedly, asking if everything was okay, but he replied that he was fine and there was nothing to worry about. She was surprised. Could he really be uninjured after such a blow? Hinata said he was leaving, but Akane stopped him, asking why he didn't ask if she was involved in what happened. He didn't quite understand what she was talking about, so he asked again if she wanted him to listen. Akane replied that no, she just wanted him to spend some time with her. Hinata said that everything was fine and he didn't care, but Akane didn't let up. Then why did he save her if she didn't support him before? The young man didn't know what to answer, so he nodded at the bouquet in her hands, saying that she should hurry. She was probably in a hurry to see someone. Akane even more. Before, when he was beaten, he didn't even try to resist. She thought he was pathetic, but it seemed she was very wrong. Akane was even glad that she was wrong. After all, he actually turned out to be a good person. Back at school, Hinata continued to think about what had happened and think about how to become stronger. Akane suddenly approached him to say hello. He was surprised that she decided to talk to him. Akane admitted that she forgot to thank him for his help yesterday and wanted to do it now. Hinata replied that everything was fine. Meanwhile, Akane's friends started asking what had happened. Hinata hoped to walk to class peacefully, but it wasn't to be. Suddenly, someone shot him in the head with the same artifact as yesterday. Oddly enough, it turned out to be the same guys. Hinata thought they were coming for Akane again. Akane's friend, Kaoru Minamura, was surprised and asked her why the boys were so angry at Hinata. Akane thought they were coming for her again, but the boys said they didn't need her anymore. Their target was Hinata now. They came to take revenge on him for yesterday, because of him they were unable to have fun in their own way. But Hinata looked calm, and only noticed that they were bothering the students from Class E again. This infuriated the guy even more, and he wanted to deal with him properly. Hinata wanted to answer something, but this time several guys took out the artifacts at once. Facing two guys with such artifacts is a serious problem for Hinata, who has the weakest artifact of all possible. Therefore, they could easily deal with him right within the school premises. One of the bullies told Hinata to hate his past self, because now they will bully him until graduation. But suddenly a shot flew at him from somewhere, similar to a projectile from an artifact. Akane didn't stand by and decided to intervene. Hinata had saved her last time. Now it was her turn to help. This made the offender even more angry, saying that she surprised him. However, their artifacts were very different, and the difference between them was huge. To demonstrate this, he fired straight at Hinata. Akane tried to stop him, but the boys didn't care. Kurimura approached the class and was very surprised to see what was happening. Hinata noticed one odd thing. Despite the severe damage, he felt almost no pain. Could these really be my own abilities and not the artifacts? He thought. If the system really was displaying his stats and not those of the suit, then he could become stronger. The guy who shot Hinata was very surprised when he got up, deciding that he simply didn't finish him off. And Hinata decided to answer them using his special skill, revenge. He was determined to prove to them that he was not a weakling, but a capable hero. He hit one of the guys with a powerful attack, but he managed to block the artifact. However, the artifact did not save him. The blow was so strong that the guy was literally slammed into the wall. The other students were shocked. How could such a weakling like Hinata do this? After all, his artifact should only reflect attacks and not strengthen blows. Moreover, the offender did not understand why Hinata was smirking at his artifact. Although the guy wasn't seriously injured, he admitted that it all happened too suddenly and he didn't have time to react. And the other one with the gun artifact decided that the reason for Hinata's resilience was that he missed the solar plexus. At that moment, Hinata wondered why his blow wasn't as powerful as expected. He must have absorbed some of the damage. Now he really had problems. His main trump card had already been used, but he was not going to give up. Their fight was suddenly interrupted by the teacher, who ordered them to stop this in the morning. All the boys, except the bullies, breathed a sigh of relief. However, Kaoru, for some reason, looked displeased. Kurimura was surprised, saying that even a weakling could become so stubborn, warning him to be careful not to injure himself. But Shu objected that he was mistaken. The giant hand was not an artifact that could be easily defeated. The opponents from Class C weren't particularly hurt, but Hinata was no longer who he was once thought to be. The young man had previously thought that his artifact was intended to enhance his suit, but everything turned out differently. In fact, the artifact itself makes the wearer stronger. This means the skills in the system work even without the suit. Hinata wondered why this was so, but continued to wear the suit anyway. It could still come in handy in case of a surprise attack. The problem was that his artifact was still too weak, and yet he couldn't see how to improve it. His thoughts were interrupted by Kurimura, who approached him. Kurimura said he just wanted to praise him for today. Of course, it was a lie to lull people's vigilance before the attack. In Kurimura's eyes, Hinata was still the same weakling who brought him food, but changes have already begun. Kurimura's blows have become less painful. Hinata wanted to respond, but he couldn't use revenge today, so he decided to endure it for now. At that moment, Akane intervened in the conversation, saying that she came to talk to Hinata. Kurimura was surprised by her appearance, noting that she had also protected him in the morning. He said he didn't believe she was protecting trash like Hinata, but Akane retorted that all he could do was imitate others. Or maybe she was wrong, and there was another motive hidden here. Maybe he bullies the weak to please girls, calling it a cheap trick. Kurimura didn't answer, and turning around, simply left. Akane told Hinata that she couldn't help him anymore, so he better handle it himself. But he simply asked why she was helping at all. She admitted that she felt guilty that the boys from Class C were now harassing him, and with this act, she decided to apologize. Hinata replied that everything was fine, and that she shouldn't worry, since he was the one who got into this mess. In response, Akane shared a short story from her past. She explained that her father fought on the front lines against monsters from another world. However, when she was still little, he was attacked by a crowd of monsters, and since then, he has not woken up. Therefore, her family began to have financial problems, and in order to feed them, her mother began to sell her body. Because of this, her mother became increasingly bizarre, bringing new men into the house every day. She became so accustomed to this that before graduating from high school, she forced Akane to do the same. Akane, of course, is grateful to her mother for raising her, but after this, she ran away to this school because she hates it with all her heart. She said she wanted to become a warrior and fight on the front lines to earn a lot of money. But she ended up in Class E, and if this continued, her future was doomed. Akane didn't understand how those guys found out about this, but yesterday they wanted to get exactly this from her, in exchange for money. Despite this, Hinata asked her why she decided to share this with him. Akane replied that he was also drawn into her problems, and she didn't like being in debt, although he wasn't going to listen to it. The girl also noted that she didn't see any boys from Class C during lunch break, which was strange. She asked Hinata to take care of himself, as they might ambush him after class. to which the boy responded in kind. Akane, leaving, told Hinata to call her Yamura from now on, not you. Kurimura continued to be angry about Akane's appearance, as it was because of her that he couldn't beat up Hinata. So he decided that he should teach him a double lesson for this. Kurimura suggested luring him to a quiet place where no one would disturb him. But then Shu noticed something strange. Through the window, he saw Kaoru talking to those same guys from Class C. It seemed strange because Kaoru and Akane were friends, and those guys had recently been harassing her. He decided to investigate and come closer, telling Kurimura that he would return to the dining room for his wallet. Getting closer, he began eavesdropping on their conversation. It seemed Kaoru was angry because they were bullying Akane, and if that was true, he thought she was in danger. However, he didn't even suspect that all of this was originally planned by Kaoru herself, and she came to talk to them specifically about this. The boys said that there was no point in reporting since their elder had already scolded them. They said that they were caught yesterday while they were on a mission, and Akane put up a lot of resistance. Kaoru was surprised to hear this, as she was sure that Akane would not resist. One of the boys asked her again, hadn't she told them that Akane had run away to this school? Shu was even more surprised. They continued to discuss how, in a situation like this, Akane should have calmly sold her body. If so, Kaoru truly was a terrible friend. But Kaoru denied this, saying that on the contrary, she kindly provides her with clients. She claimed that the school was full of students with problems, so she helped them, and she was sure Akane would be grateful. In reality, Kaoru was simply using her artifact for her own purposes. Her artifact is capable of controlling a person's consciousness, effectively hypnotizing him. The boys still asked her not to use the artifact on them, and asked why she was in Class E with such an artifact. The answer was simple. Although the artifact was incredible, it was useless against monsters. Combat power was needed, and there were monsters that its abilities were ineffective against. So the guys decided to try again, promising that they wouldn't screw up this time. Kaoru noted that she didn't know how the elder would react to their failure, but he would definitely ruin their lives. They agreed that tomorrow they would try again to lure Akane to him, this time using Kaoru's artifact. Shu realized he'd just overheard an extremely dangerous conversation and didn't know what to do now. He was certain he wouldn't be able to stop the Class C boys, and if they had a senior with them, Kurimura, naturally, won't help either, because he himself won't be able to defeat them, and he's unlikely to agree. Hinata for help, and maybe he can help Akane. Akane's father was a true hero, and she always believed in it and was proud of him. Despite the fact that she often told him this, her father constantly denied her words. He said that a hero is someone who fights without sparing himself, and he is different. He said that if you can at least protect yourself, that's already good. After all, a person who firmly adheres to his position is strong, and he advised Akane to remember this. But one day, these warm days with my father ended when he was attacked by monsters. He was in critical condition, doctors saved his life, but the disease turned out to be serious. Akane continued to believe that one day everything would change, and her father would wake up. But her mother didn't live by that belief. From that day on, she changed completely. Akane asked her not to smoke in her father's room, but she didn't care. The mother hated him for what happened, accusing him of doing it on purpose, even though he had promised to protect them. Akane begged her to stop saying that, but all she heard in response was that she was wrong, because the hospital bills were too expensive. Her mother also said that after finishing high school, Akane would have to earn the same amount of money she did. Akane didn't want that, but there was one way to cure my father. In another world, there lives a basilisk, and its liver has healing properties. It is said to be able to cure any disease. Unfortunately, basilisks are very rare, but Akane believed that one day she could get her hands on one. It was then that she decided that she would enroll in the Valkyrie school to become a warrior, like her father. But at school, everything turned out to be completely different from what she imagined. After enrolling there and ending up in Class E, Akane almost gave up on her goal, thinking it was all over for her. She was afraid to fight, fearing she might get hurt. However, with the appearance of Hinata in her life, everything changed. He became a role model for her. At the exit from the classroom, Akane was already waiting for Kaoru, and she couldn't even imagine what her friend was up to. Kaoru used her artifact to hypnotize Akane and take her to the elder. Meanwhile, Shu continued to follow Hinata to tell him what happened, but was afraid to do so. He was surprised when Hinata noticed him and asked what he wanted. Hinata said that he usually goes with Kurimura, and asked why he was following him now. Shu wanted to tell him about Kaoru and Akane, but he couldn't get the words out. He'd always bullied him, so he was too embarrassed to ask for help. Hinata decided not to wait for an answer, and said he was leaving since he didn't need anything. Even after that, Shu still didn't dare say anything. Meanwhile, Kaoru was already leading Akane straight to the elder, and Akane's gaze was detached. Shu tried to convince himself until the very end that it didn't concern him, but he still gave in and ran after them. At this time, the elder was impatiently waiting for Kaoru and asking the other guys if everything was okay. They assured him that this time, everything would go smoothly, not like last time. After all, now Kaoru herself will bring Akane, so there is no reason to worry. The elder decided to believe them because he needed Akane to earn some money. And at that moment, Kaoru arrived, and with her, Akane, who considered her closest friend. The elder was glad that she finally came, and Kaoru apologized for the slight delay. He asked if she was allowed to use her artifact, to which she replied that no, but there was no other way. This was the best way to bring her here. Akane was indeed cute, which was noticed by one of the girls who was next to the elder. She noted that the older one had wanted her to become his girlfriend, but he replied that he no longer did since she was still a child. However, he still decided to use her for his dirty money. Akane was under Kaoru's hypnosis, so she couldn't resist and responded only as her friend ordered. That's why she said she agreed, because she needed money for her father's treatment. The elder praised Kaoru's artifact highly, calling it amazing. But there was one caveat. He noticed that someone else had come with them, a rat, and it seemed that Kaoru had brought a tail with her. Shu began to panic, not understanding why he had even come here. He couldn't handle them alone. He decided to try to escape. But as soon as he emerged from hiding, Kaoru immediately used the artifact and hypnotized him. Shu was weak, so he couldn't resist and submitted to her artifact. The older one asked who the guy was and if he would cause any trouble. Kaoru replied that it was fine. He was her classmate, Hagane, so there wouldn't be any problems. With Shu under control, Kaoru ordered him to undress Akane. One of the guys, part of the same trio that attacked her earlier, said that he would film it. Shu, being under control, could not do anything and did not understand why he always behaved like this. Why is he so two-faced? Despite having a sense of justice, he still ends up on the bad side. It irritated him, but he thought he couldn't do anything about it. He knew the reason. It was easier this way. Not to resist, and then to apologize and say that there was no choice. But Hinata, he's not like that. He's different. And at that moment, Hinata himself appeared. With a powerful blow, he brought Shu back to his senses and was able to save Akane. Kaoru thought she could subdue Hinata just like Akane and Shu. But for some reason, her artifact didn't work on Hinata, no matter how hard she tried. The older one asked her who it was, and Kaoru replied that it was another one of her classmates. And although at first glance he seemed like an ordinary weakling, this was not at all the case. Kaoru tried to use the artifact against him, but it had no effect on Hinata, and he asked her why she was doing all this, since she and Akane were friends. Besides, she most likely knew about her family problems and how she ended up at the academy. But Kaoru replied that it was precisely for this reason that she helped her by providing her with the so-called job. Shu, who had been affected by her artifact, shouted at Hinata to be wary of her, as she was not at all who she claimed to be. The girl did not give up, thinking that the longer she used the artifact, the faster she would be able to subdue the guy. At this time, Shu asked Hinata why he came here, because he hadn't told him anything. Hinata replied that he had guessed this from his behavior, and that he understood that Shu was following someone else's order, although he himself did not want to. And his words touched Shu, who felt even more ashamed of his behavior. The same guys who had attacked Hinata earlier were also present with them, and they were sure that today he would not be able to escape like before. One of the guys, who had a gun-shaped artifact, suddenly shot straight at Hinata, but such a cheap trick could no longer fool him as before. The boy was surprised when Hinata was able to repel the attack, thinking that he was just lucky. But the older man objected that it was impossible to do such a thing by accident. He asked Kaoru what artifact Hinata had, to which she replied that it had no abilities. The elder didn't think so, because there are no artifacts without abilities, and he was sure that Hinata was hiding something. Despite all this, Kaoru continued to try to use the artifact against him. She was sure that it had to work, because even the strongest people could not resist it. Hinata was assisted by his own artifact, which granted him resistance to mental attacks, which is why the girl's artifact had no effect on him. Suddenly, another guy with a giant hand attacked him, but Hinata managed to dodge at the last moment. Hinata was angry and didn't understand why they were doing all this, what the point was. After all, artifacts cannot be used to harm others. Their power should protect people from monsters. But his loud speech only made the boys laugh, because they thought completely differently. At the same time, this angered the elder, and he asked Hinata if he really didn't understand the rules of this world at all. In his opinion, only a few people can get government approval and join guilds, while the rest are not even able to feed themselves. And having to work hard for these artifacts is a waste of time for him, because it won't bring him closer to wealth. But Hinata did not share his opinion, and did not want to live for the sake of enrichment. He asked if it was really necessary to hunt people who were honestly trying their best for money, and the elder confidently answered that yes, and he was not interested in anyone else. And it was strange to him why something like this had not yet dawned on Hinata. After all, if he looks around, he will see that everyone around him is looking for benefits for themselves. For example, Kaoru, who sold her friend for money. And no matter what anyone thinks, this will be the right decision, because the main goal of this world is survival. Therefore, there is no guarantee that they will be able to join the guild, and only losers can try their best, the elder thought. Hinata did not agree with him, became even more angry, and, in response to his loud speech, attacked him. But his attack was blocked by a guy with a giant hand, making it difficult for Hinata to get through. The elder said that he was disappointed in him, because he thought that Hinata would be a worthy opponent, but turned out to be an ordinary weakling. Hinata became even more angry, because for him the artifact was a way to protect himself and his loved ones. But for them, it was just fun and an opportunity to mock the weak. So he decided not to give up, and prove with his persistence that they were wrong. The elder was like Genji, ready to torture as many weak people as he could for his own pleasure. And many have the same situation as him and Akane, only others take advantage of it because they are weak. The anger boiling inside Hinata caused his suit to react and initiate a forced update. Thanks to this, he managed to break through the giant hand's defense. He upgraded the artifact and activated the Suit of Wrath, which converted his rage into immense power. Hinata told the elder and the others that he would fight until people like them disappeared forever. The elder was surprised at how quickly the boy's strength was changing, and wanted to ask Kaoru about it, but her look spoke for itself. No one knew until that moment how much power this guy really possessed. And when the elder one let his guard down, Hinata decided to attack him. At the last moment, he managed to dodge, and it only slightly grazed his face. However, the aura emanating from Hinata and his suit was slightly frightening. But the elder was not going to stand and endure the beating, and decided to use his artifact. He also noted that although he dropped out of school, he used to be in Class B. So the difference in strength between them is huge, and Hinata is to blame for coming here. He attacked him with his artifact, but Hinata managed to block his blows. This surprised the enemy, because he did not understand how a guy from Class E could possess significant strength. However, after changing his costume, Hinata began to move better than before, and is that even possible? But the elder continued to insist on the difference in their strength, adding that he had much more experience. That's right, Hinata didn't expect that even after parrying the attacks, the enemy would still be able to use them to attack again. And with the help of water, he tied him up tightly. The elder considered this his victory, telling his opponent that he should have been a little more careful. After that, he began to attack Hinata non-stop, and he couldn't even get out of the trap. Despite Hinata's abilities, the enemy's attacks were more painful than he expected. The elder decided to share with him the peculiarity of his artifact, noting that he was able to freely manipulate it by passing water through it. He was a terrible opponent for Hinata. When he was about to attack again, but with a more powerful attack, his blow was suddenly blocked by someone. It turned out to be Akane, whom Shu managed to free from Kaoru's hypnosis. Seeing this, Kaoru tried to use the artifact against her friend again. However, this time she failed, and Akane was able to react first and knock the artifact out of her hands. Akane asked her why she did that, since she thought they were good friends. And Kaoru replied that Akane herself wanted this, to earn money, but it was a lie. And Akane couldn't believe that Kaoru actually thought that about her. Kaoru was also surprised, because she was sure that she would follow in her mother's footsteps and should be grateful to her. For Kaoru, it was all just a joke, but it completely drove Akane crazy. As she was about to attack Kaoru again, she was suddenly struck in the back. It was the same guy who had a gun similar to Akane's artifact, but more powerful. Hinata was tied up, Akane was exhausted, and Shu didn't have the courage to save them. The elder stated that it was all over for Hinata, but later he would tell him what this world was really like. However, Akane found the strength to get up and told Hinata that she was angry but couldn't do anything yet. She promised to try her best and to make sure to show that she has become stronger. After these words, Akane shot the elder in order to weaken his guard and free Hinata from the trap. It worked, and Hinata was able to successfully escape from the trap. But Akane was no longer able to do anything, and asked Hinata to finish what she had started. Looking at the girl's determination, Hinata also did not retreat, and decided to save her at all costs. For the former Class B student, reusing the artifact was no problem at all. But now this was no longer an obstacle for Hinata, because his main trump card was the skill Revenge. This outcome of events surprised the elder, and he did not understand how the boy was becoming stronger each time. Hinata changed his tone and told him that they couldn't be bullied, even if they were from Class E. He came closer and began to attack the elder, who was speechless from surprise and tried to respond in a hurry. Hinata continued to attack and push him into a corner, saying that since they were weaklings from Class E, why couldn't he beat them? While retreating, the elder slipped on his own water bottle and fell. So he backed himself into a corner and gave Hinata a great chance to deliver the finishing blow. None of the offenders could even imagine that everything would turn out this way, and that their leader would be defeated. They couldn't believe his defeat, and in desperation they tried to attack Hinata. But such attacks would no longer fool him, since this was not the first time something like this had happened to him. Hinata easily counterattacked and grabbed the older man by the collar, telling him that it was better not to approach them. After all, he doesn't have any extra time to waste on people like them. The aura emanating from Hinata was truly monstrous. He was a completely different person. Looking at him, Akane remembered her father's words about how a person who believes in one goal is stronger than anyone else. They could be congratulated on the successful completion of this unpleasant incident because they all tried their best. But the incident did not go unnoticed. Someone from the school filmed the whole thing and transmitted it to the principal. What they managed to see was quite unexpected. The principal noted that the school does not need those who go too far, and they will have to be dealt with. He found out who was ruining the school's reputation, but at the same time, he discovered something interesting. It looked like the next exam would be much more interesting, and he was already looking forward to it. The next day, all 4 students involved in the Akane incident were expelled from school and were not allowed to return. Akane and Hinata didn't expect this outcome, believing that the boys would simply be punished. However, the girl noted that they all had a bad reputation, except Kaoru. And at that moment, Kurimura and Shu passed by. Kurimura didn't care who was expelled, so he headed to the cafeteria, and Shu didn't dare talk to the guys. Even though he had something to say, he was afraid to do it. Hinata noted that he wished Shu could communicate normally with them, but Akane replied that some things never change. After all, when she thanked him the day before, he only replied that he had done nothing and quickly left. Hinata was surprised by his behavior, but instead of dwelling on it, he decided to go to the cafeteria. Akane decided to go with him, and Hinata asked why, since she had a bento with her. The girl replied that it would be cool to have lunch together. Hinata didn't mind, so they had lunch in the academy park. He told her that his artifact had received additional characteristics, and this greatly surprised Akane. Hinata thought that she also had such abilities. She asked if he had similar options before, but they were too weak to use, and Hinata confirmed. Yesterday he was so angry that he didn't even have time to check the system for updates. He improved the artifact, and the system reported a new improvement. The attack power increased, and the suit of rage began to strengthen it, which was required. Thanks to the emotions, the suit changed, and although Hinata didn't know the conditions for the next upgrade, everything was moving towards it becoming even stronger. Therefore, he needs to grow further and become stronger than he is now. Akane also wanted to undergo special training. Although she couldn't improve her artifact like Hinata, she still wanted to become stronger. That's why she promised to try her best. And Hinata said he knew about it. He added that as long as she uses the artifact, her physical abilities will grow along with her strength and skill level. The fact that she escaped with only minor injuries after that blow confirms this. This also proves that she has been working hard on herself. Akane was confused by his words and admitted that she was still not strong enough. But as she promised, she will show what she is really capable of and thanked him for yesterday. Hinata replied that it would be so, and together, they would become stronger. Someone secretly watched their conversation from the academy. Shizuku watched them and chuckled that the weaklings looked good together. She asked Sachi if she thought the same, but she didn't agree. Shizuku then invited Sachi to join their group, hinting that it might come in handy for the re-exam. But Sachi refused and said that she would refrain from making a decision for now. Shizuku wasn't happy with this answer, but she said that if she changed her mind, she should let him know, because there was still time. Sachi didn't trust the people who were around Shizuku. There were bad rumors about them, and they might have been involved in the expulsion of some students. She was sure that at first glance they seemed like ordinary guys, but in reality everything was different. She was most interested in Akane and Hinata because they were not like the others. Seeing how they dealt with difficulties together, Sachi wanted to join them. But in Shizuku, she saw a threat, and sometimes even extraordinary cruelty. Training in the portal was important, but skipping classes at school was also not an option. Class E's homeroom teacher was Takashima Gonzo, who explained to the students that there were many ways to improve artifacts, but developing the body was the key to progress. And although they were inferior to the other students in strength, they still had a chance. They had to prove that their place in this class was a real mistake. Seeing Hinata getting stronger, Kurimura began to worry. The teacher informed them that there would be a re-exam soon, and if they did not change their grade, they would remain in Class E forever. But even in this case, one couldn't give up, because the level of the artifact isn't everything. The assessment depended not only on the artifact, but also on physical abilities and intelligence. Moreover, this year the exam includes teamwork. However, upon hearing this, the other students were not particularly happy, and Shu asked how the distribution would proceed. The teacher replied that a team could consist of 2 to 5 people, and that they could choose them independently, regardless of class. Then Kurimura asked if this was a joke, because who would want to take a student from Class E into the team? Teacher Gonzo noted that this was a test in which they would be able to meet new people, since the school's mission was to send excellent warriors to the guild for the country, and it should not be forgotten that in the guild they would have to cooperate with others. He added that although Class E was the lowest, they still needed to try to get out of it, but Kurimura thought it was impossible. None other than Hinata for this, because if he had given up on the exam back then, everything would have been different. After class, Akane asked Hinata what they were going to do, but he didn't really understand what she meant. Akane explained that they needed to find members for the group during the exam. Kurimura intervened in their conversation, stating that it was unlikely that anyone would want to team up with a weakling like Hinata. Akane asked him what he wanted anyway, since he came here, but he replied that he wanted nothing. In response, he grabbed Hinata and said that since he was feeling better, he should run and buy him food. Hinata was about to answer, but then Akane intervened and told Kurimura to go get food himself. Her words made Kurimura angry, and he asked her what she meant. He noted that they often spent time together, and asked if she was planning to team up with him after Kaoru was expelled. Akane replied that Hinata was much better than him, and Kurimura wasn't suited for teamwork. He asked her what she was talking about, but Akane pointed at Shu and asked if he thought the same thing. Kurimura grabbed Shu and began to interrogate him, asking if he really agreed with Akane. But Shu replied that this was not so. He had no reason to think so, and besides, he would like to unite with him. Watching this, Hinata and Akane wanted to intervene, but they realized it was useless. After this, Kurimura began to have doubts about Shu. Akane suggested discussing how to retake the exam, but without them, since they didn't have time to think about others. Along the way, Akane talked about Shu, and how it was useless to interfere with their affairs with Kurimura to save him. However, she hopes that he will change his position someday, and Hinata asked if it would be okay if she teamed up with him. She replied that it was her own decision, so there was no need to worry, because Hinata was strong and should be confident in himself. Many still considered him the weakest student, so he had to prove otherwise in this exam. Sachi happened to be passing by and became interested in what they were chatting about. She noted that the atmosphere around Hinata had changed from what she had seen before. It looks like he will really be able to prove himself and surprise everyone. Meanwhile, Kurimura became furious after Akane's words. He asked Shu if there had been any serious injuries or deaths during the re-exams. Shu replied that yes, unfortunately, this had happened before. This year, the retest will be conducted in a D-class area, taking into account real combat operations, so accidents with serious consequences are possible. Kurimura decided to create all the conditions for one of these random incidents. Meanwhile, the upcoming re-exam was hotly debated online. Most people bet on Shizuku and Sachi to win, as they were considered the favorites. And Hinata was an underdog in the eyes of others, and no one believed in his victory. But this did not demotivate him at all, and he continued to train in order to perform better than in the previous exam. Previously, a sudden attack from the monster from behind would have caught him off guard, and he could have died. Now he could easily repel such attacks, and easily counterattack his opponents. Since the first exam, Hinata has significantly improved, not only in strength, but also in other characteristics. However, there was something that was bothering him, because he still did not understand all the features of his suit. The Wrath suit was much stronger than before, but it drained his strength faster, and Hinata could feel his energy draining away. In addition, when the strength was depleted, the suit imposed penalties and consumed health every second. Therefore, he needed to become even stronger in order to use the new suit without restrictions, since the indomitable suit would be his main one for some time. Along with him, Akane also became stronger, because after the recent events, they began to train together. Akane arrived a little later than scheduled, and apologized for the delay due to the extra classes she was attending. Despite the fact that the Valkyrie school was considered primarily military, education remained compulsory. Akane asked why Hinata didn't take extra classes, since they could have been useful to him too. She wasn't too happy that he decided not to visit them. Hinata had once studied additional material with Shizuku, but she said that regular training was not enough. Akane about this. So he said that he studied everything on his own in the evenings, and the girl was surprised by his effort. However, there was no time for talking now, because it was time to practice so as not to fail the exam. There was very little time left before it started, so they needed to become stronger in this short time. Sachi was secretly spying on them, trying to hide her presence, but Hinata managed to notice her. She suddenly attacked them, thinking they weren't expecting it, but at the last moment, Hinata grabbed Akane and dodged the blow. Akane didn't even have time to understand who it was, and was very scared. Sachi appeared from behind a tree and praised Hinata, noting that he had changed noticeably. Before, he wouldn't have even been able to notice her attack, but now, he was able to dodge it. Hinata saw her for the first time, so he asked who she was, which greatly surprised Sachi. Akane replied that she knew her. The girl's name is Sachi Shirahane, a student in Class A, is rumored to be as strong as Shizuku. Sachi thought that Hinata would recognize her, so when he asked who she was, she became a little sad. Akane's words. She replied that Shizuku had been acting strange lately, and she believed that Hinata was the reason. So she came here to test him and see what he was capable of. Hinata dodged her attack and grabbed the weapon, passing an electrical impulse through himself, since he could not use an artifact of this level. But Sachi was no slouch either, and managed to dodge his counterattack. Her artifact allowed her to fight not only up close, but also to release a powerful stream of force from a distance. Hinata dodged, but Sachi was superior in agility and fighting skills. Despite this, the guy did not give up, and continued to fight off her attacks. However, the difference between them was huge, and Sachi was clearly no match for him. She noted that he was already on a different level, and if he hadn't hidden his abilities, he could have become even stronger. Hinata asked her what her goal was, and why she appeared so suddenly. She replied that all the participants in the next exam wanted to team up with her, but she, on the contrary, was looking for an interesting person. That's why she wants to team up with Hinata, as he is perfect for the role. But Hinata didn't hesitate and immediately refused. Sachi asked again, thinking she had misheard, but his answer did not change. The girl got angry and didn't understand why he refused, and Hinata asked if she really thought it was possible to unite after a surprise attack. Moreover, he is sure that she should not seek recognition only by force, because this way she will easily get into the best class. But then they will hate him even more, and no one will believe that he achieved everything himself. He was of course grateful to her, but was forced to refuse. After all, his goal is to join the guild, and to do this, he needs to earn recognition through his own efforts. Sachi didn't try to convince him otherwise, and, as she was leaving, said that he was interesting, and she was looking forward to him moving up a class. Akane, on the other hand, didn't understand why Hinata missed such an opportunity. Hinata reminded that he had already said everything, and added that Sachi didn't even look at Akane. She was only concerned with her own interests. Akane seemed to be starting to understand him, and Hinata added that teamwork shouldn't be expected from Sachi. And to get a good grade, the entire group needs to make an effort. Otherwise, it will have less chance of getting a high rating. Hinata's words made her happy, and she was happy that she had such a friend. Hinata continued to think about what had happened, because Sachi was one of the strongest in Class A, and he was inferior to her in all respects. She was still holding back. But even in his anger suit, he didn't have the slightest chance. He felt excited and decided to check out the new upgrades to the suit, as he couldn't catch up in his current situation. But the list of improvements became longer. In addition, he discovered a new award, the Audience, the meaning of which he did not yet understand. Meanwhile, the task force for combating monsters from another world discussed the situation. They regularly gathered in guilds to consider important decisions. The Minister of Defense was Ganling Ping, who asked about the progress of the investigation into the appearance of the new portal. The head of the Phoenix Guild, Kagura Ginji, was present at the meeting. There was also a master of the Deldoris Guild, Sherry Truman, and the courageous master of the Victory Guild, Shio Mizui. All three were S-ranked. Ginji noted that they were desperately trying to close the portal, but to no avail. Shio said that if Ginji knew about this in advance, he should have reported it, which Sherry agreed with. Ginji replied that if he had deliberately hidden it, he would have already lost his job. Sherry said she didn't want to deal with people like him. Their argument was interrupted by the Minister of Defense, who asked if there had been any changes in the last 6 months. Haikon of the Gifted Guild reported that the intervals between portal appearances had begun to decrease. Guildmasters noted that they are coping for now, but they may soon face serious problems. Therefore, a great catastrophe may happen again, as it happened before. Kyoto also emphasized that the monsters had become much stronger than before, and when the next great disaster occurred, the damage would be colossal. Countermeasures need to be taken as soon as possible to avoid this. Jinji noted that this requires suitable candidates to join the guilds. Valkyrie High School principal Atsushi Tsushima responded that there were more capable students this year than they had expected. Besides, they were holding a re-exam soon. Genji asked the principal if there were any students worth keeping an eye on, and Atsushi replied that there were. Among the first-year students, Sachi stands out Shiharane and Shizuku Minase. He also has high hopes for them. Shizuku is able to freely manipulate the life energy of her artifact, Lunanor. And Sachi owns the artifact Geborg, which is capable of generating explosive energy. The masters noted how powerful and rare their artifacts were, and Sherry didn't even hide the fact that she wanted Shizuku to join her guild. Jinji asked if there really was no one else but these two. The director replied that he would be able to see for himself during this exam. He also added that it would be great if the school had students who were good at defense. This position has been vacant for a long time, and they've been struggling to find a suitable candidate. Genji noted that the school has a son whose father held this position for a long time. He could very well take over. The masters weren't quite sure who they were talking about, but Kureha added that it was Hinata, the same guy who had completely undressed during the exam. The principal replied that he was still in school, and Genji found it hard to believe. He said he didn't understand him since he wielded an incompetent artifact, yet he continued to fight. In Genji's opinion, that was too stupid. Atsushi, however, replied that wasn't entirely true, and that he would soon show what his artifact was capable of. The day of the re-exam has arrived. The day when students are given a second chance to determine their ranking. It's not often you see so many people at a school event. This year, the test will take place in the D-rank portal. It was strange for the guild masters to see the anticipation on the students' faces before an exam in which participants often sustain serious injuries. The director said that the modern world is full of bad news, so everyone needs a break. He also thanked Sherry for providing security services from their guild, but Sherry replied that it wasn't worth it, since training successors was their guild's job, and besides, she paid special attention to Shizuku. She noted that, as expected, Shizuku was interacting with her peers, and Atsushi was curious how she figured that out. Sherry replied that she could see it from afar, as a guildmaster. She also wondered if there were any other students worthy of her attention, perhaps Hinata and Akane. This year's re-exam will take place in the Tangled Garden of Portal D. The first group didn't surprise me in any way. On the contrary, it disappointed me. The students were unable to resist the monster, and it seemed that right now, they would all die at his hands. However, the Dolores Guild, which was in charge of security for this trial, did not allow the students to die, and acted to protect them. But, unfortunately, for such students, the test was over. Spectators were amazed by the Dolores Guild, which quickly came to the aid of students when they found themselves in critical situations. This year, drones will also be flying inside the portal, ensuring safety at the site itself. Dolores Guild truly showed top class, proving their title as an S-rank guild. But don't forget about the exam rules. While in the portal, students must earn points. Points can be obtained, for example, by obtaining magic stones for hunting monsters, or by collecting ore and various plants inside the portal, which will bring additional points. Participants should also remember that this year their teamwork will be assessed. Therefore, it is important not only how many stones or jewels are collected, but also their cohesion. Their success or failure will be broadcast on screen and live. Students only have 1 hour to complete the entire exam, so they should hurry. Akane and Hinata would go next after the first group finished. Akane noted that this all looked unpleasant. After all, they and Hinata take it seriously, while the others see it as a show. She asked if it irritated Hinata, because it seemed like they were simply being devalued. But Kurimura, who overheard their conversation, intervened in their dialogue and said that there was nothing wrong with it, since they were the center of attention. But Akane and Hinata didn't really understand what he was talking about. Kurimura replied that the broadcast of the re-exam is currently at the top of the viewing list. He asked Hinata if he would put on a performance like last time. Hinata wanted to answer him, but then Akane intervened, asking if that was really why he came here. to which Kurimura replied that he was just passing by. However, leaning on Hinata, he told him that this day was important for everyone, and nothing bad should happen. Shu seemed to want to say something, but he couldn't because of his own fear. And then an announcement was made that the exam for the second group would begin very soon, so the participants should gather near the portal. Kurimura wished them luck, but it was clearly not with good intentions. Shu tried to say something, but he got scared and decided to just run away. Akane didn't understand what had happened to him, because today he looked even stranger than before. However, they had no time to chat because the exam for the second group would soon begin. The teacher reminded the students that they would be carrying a device they could use in an emergency to call for help. As soon as they give the signal, the Deldoris Guild will immediately rush to their aid. And now that everyone has been informed of the rules, it's time to begin the re-exam. The second group was of particular interest to both the teachers and the spectators, as it included Sachi, who possessed a powerful artifact. But besides her, there were also other, no less interesting participants. Most viewers also did not forget Hinata, in particular his first entrance exam. And their first enemy was a giant monster, an ogre, which for many was already very difficult from the very beginning. The furious beast was huge and attacked quickly, without waiting for the enemy to take action. Many thought that everything would end here for Hinata and Akane, but it was not so. Today's Hinata was different from the guy who ran naked during the exam trying to pass it. Jinji also watched the broadcast and was surprised to see how the guy had changed. The rest of the audience was also pleasantly surprised. Guildmaster Sherry noted that this was the first time she had seen a sacred relic that could change shape. After all, before everyone considered him a useless nobody. But despite this, the director was merciless to those who lacked talent. However, if a person didn't have potential, he wouldn't even be able to get into Class E. Therefore, Sherry assumed that Hinata was not an ordinary boy and could pleasantly surprise her in the future. Director Atsushi replied that her guess was correct, and he had high hopes for the boy. Meanwhile, Hinata and Akane continued to deal with the monster without any difficulty. Hinata may have been the center of attention, but this was a team exam. That's why Akane didn't lag behind either, because she also trained a lot to become stronger. They make a great duo, as Akane has a ranged weapon, and Hinata can be a shield or switch to close-range attack. That's how they acted. While Akane distracted the monster, Hinata waited for the right moment to deliver the decisive blow. Their unity was at an incredible level, and yet, just recently, they seemed like candidates for relegation even from Class E. The monster, as stated in the rules, dropped a magic crystal, which gives additional rating points. Hinata thanked Akane for her help, saying that she did a great job, and Akane responded in kind. Kurimura was secretly watching them, waiting for the moment when Hinata and Akane would find themselves in a critical situation. Akane noted that their training had really paid off, and the feeling of strength was simply wonderful. Hinata agreed with her, because thanks to all that hard training, he really did become much stronger. He managed to discover the Fist of Fury, a technique that releases all of his accumulated power in an instant. He received this skill along with the Fury suit. He was able to achieve this result in just 2 weeks, and although he can't wear the suit all the time, this won't stop him. As Hinata was completely lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice how an enemy appeared behind him. However, Akane reacted instantly and killed the small monster. Hinata noted to himself that Akane was filling his weaknesses. Thanks to her efforts, the power of her artifact had increased significantly. In addition, he began to notice enemies better, just like Akane herself. It didn't matter whether it was a huge monster or a group of goblins against them. They continued to act together, relying on each other. Akane easily knocked out the smaller monsters, leaving the stronger ones for Hinata, and their teamwork ultimately led to victory. Compared to their current versions, they are now on a completely different level. Now, Hinata also has the finishing blow, so passing the re-exam should be a piece of cake for him. Akane noted that they had succeeded again, and obtained even more magic crystals. At this rate, they will pass the entire re-exam together and move up a class. However, Kurimura was not satisfied with their pace, and was disappointed that they did not die at the hands of the monsters. He was beside himself with anger. Although Shu tried to calm him down, it was all in vain. Kurimura couldn't believe that Hinata was able to defeat the organization. He thought that maybe Akane did all this, but no. Kurimura began to hate Hinata even more, because it turns out that he could always hit him. He just pitied him, hiding his true strength. So he decided to change the plan and go back to the original one that he and Shu had agreed on. Shu tried to convince him, but Kurimura was beside himself with anger and didn't want to listen to anything. Their original plan was to set the portal boss on the couple. The boss doesn't just leave his lair, but with the help of Shu's potion-making artifact, he can easily be forced to attack someone. Kurimura thought that they would die from the ogre, and he wouldn't have to resort to such a plan. But everything changed. Shu always admired heroes, and after the war started, everyone admired them. He believed that one day he would become a hero like him, saving people from monsters. But his dream did not come true. Shu possessed the stem cell artifact, after which he stopped believing that he would ever become a hero. The artifact's ability is simple. It extracts essence from living creatures and turns it into a potion. But he can't do anything alone because he doesn't have enough strength to attack. This is why he ended up in Class E, where everything went downhill. To close his gap in strength, he needed a partner with offensive capabilities, and that's what Kurimura became. But it was just an excuse to achieve more, and he felt guilty for his choice. However, at the same time, he felt a strong sense of relief. After all, when he thought that everything was bad for him, there was someone else for whom things were much worse. But Hinata, whom he had previously despised, had become much stronger, to the point that Shu began to doubt his choice even more. He was surprised when Hinata was able to bring to their knees those who once looked down on him. And while Shu was busy self-destructing, Hinata continued to work hard to achieve his goal. But his achievements did not motivate him to become stronger, but on the contrary, they made him even more angry. So he went for it. He helped Kurimura carry out his evil plan to have the portal boss attack Hinata. Even though he knew it wasn't worth it, he still decided to do it. And right now, Shu has become the one he hated so fiercely, and is fighting against the one he so desired to become. He, along with Kurimura and another member of their group, were near the portal boss. Shu fired a precise shot straight into the boss's body, provoking him to attack. His potion worked quickly, and all that was left was to take the monster to Hinata. Kurimura noted that the ingredient Shu used for the potion was the berserker pheromone, which causes the monster to attack anyone who is left with a trace of the potion. He didn't expect the potion to work even on the portal boss, but Shu started to object that it seemed like they were overdoing it. Kurimura didn't share his emotions. On the contrary, he considered him too talkative for the one who started all this. If he were a person capable of such feelings, he wouldn't mind. But Shu also portrayed himself as a victim, and this infuriated Kurimura. However, he had another plan of his own that Shu didn't know about. Kurimura said that it was time for them to leave, but Shu stopped him and asked where they were going. In response, Kurimura spilled the rest of the potion on Shu, making him the boss's target. Kurimura justified this by saying that they needed to destroy all evidence that could lead to them. Shu realized the situation he was in, and how wrong he had been to make that choice. But it was too late. He asked Kurimura why he needed all this, to which he replied that the teachers would probably start investigating the circumstances of the portal boss's appearance, and in that case, they would be expelled if they were caught. Shu understood everything. Kurimura was trying to put all the blame on him, but it was too late. The boss ran after him, and Shu was weak enough to run away from him. He wanted to try to use the device to call for help, but Kurimura got ahead of him and quietly took it away. Shu realized the situation he was in, and that Kurimura had simply abandoned him. And besides, he wouldn't have time to mask the scent. But he had one potion left, and despite the risks, he was determined to use it against Hinata. Meanwhile, Akane and Hinata continued to calmly go through the exam, killing one monster after another. Akane was glad that at this rate, she would be able to advance to Class D. However, suddenly, someone from the forest spilled an unknown liquid on the guy. Hinata didn't understand what happened, and Akane asked if he was okay. It was the first time he had seen such a liquid, and he didn't understand what it was, and most importantly, whose it was. And then Shu appeared from behind the trees, and Hinata was surprised when he saw him, especially when he was all wounded. The same portal boss appeared behind him, but now he attacks not him, but Hinata, and to this, Shu says that he has had enough. Despite this, Hinata continues to protect Shu and blocks the boss's attack. But the boss is not an ordinary monster, so dealing with him will not be so easy. Even in this situation, when Shu literally brought his death to him, Hinata continued to worry about him. Shu didn't understand why he did this, why he didn't let the boss kill him, to which Hinata replied that his life would not end here because he did not know how to give up. The audience was also surprised when they saw the portal boss and began to worry if everything was okay. Sherry ordered the guild members to immediately rescue the students, as this was a C-rank monster that they would not be able to handle alone. She also noted that this incident was caused by someone intentionally. After all, usually the portal boss does not leave his shelter, because otherwise the portal will collapse. The director replied that he knew about it, and that this was the first time he had seen such recklessness. Only a few people were capable of pulling something like this off. He thought it might have been Shu, but he was still more certain that the boy had been set up. However, at the same time, he thought that they could rely on Hinata now. Despite the difference in strength between the monster and Hinata, he did not retreat and continued the fight. Akane was worried about her friend, because fighting a boss is far from the same as fighting some goblins. Despite this, Hinata managed to save Shu, and together they dodged the enemy's attack. The damage from the boss's previous attack was still taking its toll. The difference was not only in strength, but also in skills. But even so, Hinata did not want to give up. He waited for a moment when he could calmly attack the boss, and managed to land a blow on him. However, such a trick won't defeat him. The force of his blow is like a tickle for the monster. Hinata wasn't looking his best, and Akane wanted to help him, but he pushed her away sharply, telling her to stay away for her safety. And at that moment, the boss attacked her again, and if Akane hadn't pushed him away, he would have hit her too. The pain was unbearable, and although Hinata knew his chances of winning were slim, he continued to hold on. Looking at all this from the outside, Shu asked him why he didn't give up. Akane also shouted at him that he better give up and retreat, because they wouldn't be able to handle him. However, Hinata continued to hold out. The young man knew that he could cope with some of the damage by using the revenge skill, but he was unlikely to completely defeat the boss. Shu shouted at him to stop, saying that it was his fault and he could leave the monster to him and save himself. The boy provoked the boss to change his priority, and it worked. Even so, when the monster rushed at Shu, Hinata did not retreat and suddenly attacked him. But that didn't work either, and the boss was able to easily repel his attack. Hinata would have already been dead if not for his suit. Shu kept telling him to run away and leave the boss to him, but he didn't listen to him. After all, Hinata couldn't just run away and leave the monster, and Shu didn't understand him. But the young man replied that he must try to save everyone, as his father had done. A man he respects. Even when his life was in danger, he was not indifferent to people. And if he runs away now, he will never be able to meet him. Therefore, Hinata must stand against the monster and defeat it, no matter what. The young man continued to dodge the boss's attacks, at least to delay him, since Deldoris was probably already on his way. He thought he could hold out until they arrived, but it wasn't that easy. Kurimura watched from the sidelines and was happy to see his classmate die at his own hands. And yet, Hinata's confidence was his undoing. The young man was unable to defeat the portal boss and died. However, he completed the quest, which rewarded him with a meeting. When he woke up, he found himself in an unknown place. Opposite him sat an unfamiliar girl, saying that she had finally waited for their meeting, calling him Master. Hinata didn't understand where he was or who this girl was in front of him, because he had just fought the portal boss. Could it all be a dream? Or had he died and gone to heaven? But the girl helped him with the answer, and said that he was already dead. Or to be more precise, on the brink of death, so there is still a chance of survival. Hinata didn't understand how she was able to get behind him so quickly, and what was even going on here. The girl continued to say that he was only alive because she called him here, so he should be grateful to her. She also said that he shouldn't be upset, because this spiritual world is under her control. In simple terms, this is the world inside Hinata's suit, the inner world of the artifact. The girl showed him what was happening outside and the situation he was in. Therefore, if he returns now, he will hardly be able to repel the attack and will die completely. Hinata asked her if that meant she had helped him, and she replied that that was exactly it. He thanked her and apologized for doubting his artifact. But the girl replied that it was too early for him to relax, because at this rate, he would definitely die. She will be able to help him, but only once, because she has no more strength left. Hinata asked her what he should do, and she said she would give him a little instruction. To do it, he needed to bend over a little. After this, the girl suddenly inserted 2 fingers directly into the young man's eyes, which he clearly did not expect. The pain was monstrous, but the girl noted that she had corrected his eyes, because he seemed to have forgotten how to see with them, since he fought so recklessly against an opponent he could never defeat. She noted that his fighting style was too rough, so he should study it properly first. At the same time, Hinata's eyes changed slightly. He asked her who she was and what she was doing inside his artifact. The girl introduced herself as the Nameless Traitor, but that only added more questions to Hinata's mind. However, he had no time to ask them. His time was up, and the hour had come to return to the real world. He tried to stop her to ask her something else, but she replied that he hadn't taken the test yet. If he wants to know more, he needs to become stronger, and then she will answer all his questions. After all, he must be curious as to why a weapon like an artifact gave him everything that led to the war. And why did monsters start appearing from portals, killing people? Hinata didn't understand what she was talking about, but he wanted to ask her a lot of questions. At parting, the trader said that they would meet again, and she would look forward to it. Waking up in the real world, Hinata seemed to become a different person. He managed to dodge the boss's attack, and Akane was happy that he was okay. Hinata became faster and found it easier to dodge enemy attacks. Akane screamed at him that he almost died and they needed to run quickly. But Hinata replied that he would not run away anywhere, because he intended to defeat the monster. The portal boss continued to attack him, but the young man skillfully dodged his attacks. If he had been pinned to the tree before, now he felt like a fish in water. Thanks to his new eyes, he can clearly see the boss's attacks and dodge them without difficulty. Besides his movements, he can also see his sinister aura and killing intent. This really scared him. Hinata began to think that it was because he was on the verge of death. But despite this, he could now clearly see the enemy and his weakest spot. Now that he could freely dodge attacks and knew the enemy's weak point, all that was left was to strike with all his might, using the skill Revenge. By this time, they had already been found by the guys from the Deldoris Guild, who came running to save them. However, they noticed something strange, so they decided to take their time and consult with the guildmaster. Meanwhile, Hinata rushed to attack the boss without any ulterior motive. He managed to dodge the monster's attack and strike directly at its weak spot. He succeeded. The blow was so powerful that the monster was simply exhausted. And in the end, the C-rank boss of Portal D was successfully defeated by Hinata. The audience couldn't believe what they were seeing, because during the first exam, this guy ran around naked trying not to die from an ordinary goblin, and now he managed to defeat the boss. Hikari was also incredibly happy for her older brother and his success on the exam. Even Shizuku was extremely surprised when she saw what Hinata was capable of. However, there were those who rejoiced at Hinata's success, as well as those who were interested in him with less than good intentions. After such a fight, Hinata was exhausted, but thanks to Akane and Shu, he was at least able to get back on his feet. Kurimura was furious and couldn't believe his plan had failed again. He didn't understand how this was possible, how the guy managed to defeat the portal boss himself, and why his movement suddenly improved. Kurimura wanted to kill Hinata with his own hands. The guy who was in the same group with him tried to stop him, but it was no use. But their conversation was being filmed by one of the guild members, and the guild master and director were also watching it. Sherry ordered the impudent man to be arrested immediately, but the director asked him not to rush. Atsushi said that it was better for them not to interfere, but rather to observe the situation. After all, if they stopped Kurimura halfway, they would only further inflame his anger, which could cause him to try to do something similar again. Sherry asked if the principal really wanted Hinata to deal with him himself, and Atsushi replied that that was exactly it. She asked again if this would be a good idea, since he seemed to be completely exhausted. Atsushi replied that if anything went wrong, the guild members would intervene. But for now, everything should be fine. Meanwhile, Kurimura was rushing headlong straight towards the exhausted Hinata. He was confident that with just one blow, he could finish off the guy and end his revenge. But even exhausted, Hinata did not give up his position and easily blocked the enemy's attack. This infuriated Kurimura, and he began swinging his fists recklessly, trying to break through Hinata's defense. However, it was all in vain, and Hinata found a moment to counterattack. Hinata managed to knock him to the ground, and asked Kurimura if it was true that he had arranged all of this. He grabbed him and said that it was enough to try to kill him and somehow touch him. But Kurimura didn't want to give up and tried to hit Hinata. Hinata responded in kind by headbutting him in the forehead. Kurimura never thought that things would turn out exactly like this, and that the one he was bullying would be able to knock him down. Hinata told him that he had simply not touched him all this time, which only made Kurimura even more angry. Out of anger, he recklessly attacked Hinata to get revenge on him for everything. But Hinata was no longer the same person he once was, and he wasn't going to just take the blows. Instead, he attacked back. He managed to defeat him without even using the artifact, and that was the end of Kurimura's school story. The director noted that Hinata and Kurimura were an example of the difference between someone who worked hard and someone who did nothing. From this moment on, the exam for the second group can be considered complete. The day after the test, Hinata and Akane's school life changed dramatically. If before everyone looked at them with contempt and a desire to kill, now everyone smiles when they see them. Akane noted that now everyone is paying attention to them, although before they ignored them, and now they act as if nothing had happened. But Hinata was happy with how his school days had changed, and that he had been able to prove his strength. Akane also said that everyone treats them differently now, and this makes her happy. Even those who seem to have given up on them have changed their attitude towards them. Shizuku noted that Hinata had managed to impress her yesterday, and in some ways, she had even changed her mind. But despite this, he would never have won in Class A. Akane asked Hinata what was wrong with Shizuku, because this behavior really irritated her. Hinata replied that it was okay, since she was always like that, so her words should be taken as a compliment. However, while someone was happy for Hinata, someone secretly wanted to harm him. Meanwhile, Shu was expelled for his involvement in the attempted murder of students during the exam and was packing his things to go home. The end result of his choice was expulsion, the thing he feared most. Hinata was waiting for him at the exit of the dorm, and Shu was surprised when he saw him. Shu said that he was just in time because before leaving, he wanted to say goodbye to him. Hinata wanted to ask him about what happened, but he didn't know where to start. And Shu replied that it wasn't worth it, because it was all his own fault. And to be honest, being expelled isn't the worst possible outcome for him, since Kurimura was sent to juvenile detention for attempted murder. But he was simply expelled, considered a victim, just like him and Akane. So he has nothing to complain about. Hinata looked at him with a downcast expression, but Shu said that he shouldn't look at him like that, since it wasn't his fault. And despite all this, he will not give up and will continue his research with the help of his artifact. As a gift before leaving, Shu gave him a potion he created with his artifact. The director said that even though his artifact had no attack power, it could still be useful with potions. Therefore, he prepared a letter of recommendation for him so that he could continue his studies outside of Valkyrie School. Shu noted that he might not have the talent to be a warrior, but in that case, he would find himself making potions. After seeing Hinata's determination, he realized that he too should not give up and continue on his path. So Hinata can be sure that he will not fall into despair, and one day, he will become much stronger. Finally, Shu said that he sincerely regretted what happened and that he was involved in it. And despite all this, he is grateful to Hinata for everything he did for him. This is where their paths diverge, and from that day on, Hinata will continue to become the strongest hero, while Shu will seek his place in another field. Meanwhile, the principal was happy about another school year that had just passed, noting that it had gone as smoothly as the last one, despite that situation. But despite this, he noted that thanks to this, they were able to attract attention. And it seems that even the guildmaster Shari was pleased with everything and was very impressed as she watched the heirs train. She also noted that she would be happy to accept Hinata as a trainee. This is really surprising because they usually rarely offer internship. The director also noted that first-year students are now officially allowed to go to the front lines. However, to do this, they need to join a guild, and not everyone can do that. The secretary also added that the student must be in Class C or above. How could Hinata cope if she was in Class E? But this was no longer a problem. Since that day, Hinata was transferred to Class B, and Akane to Class C. On the one hand, Hinata was glad that he managed to move up a class, but not everything was so smooth. After all, most of the students who study there doubted his achievements on the exam. In addition to Class B, there is also Class A, and they both differ greatly from Class E, including in terms of training. In this class, Hinata saw opportunities for growth that weren't available in Class E, so he needs to work hard to avoid failing. But one of the students from Class B prevented him from being alone with his thoughts. He approached him, pretending to ask what it was like to be in a new class. The guy introduced himself as Arakawa Subaru, saying that he entered Class B in order to get into Class A in the future. And suddenly his smile turned to disdain, and he asked Hinata how he managed to cheat everyone on the exam. He argued that during his entire time of study, he had never heard of a student from Class E suddenly transferring to Class B. Subaru noted that everyone was curious about how the boy was able to get into their class so quickly, and whether he really had the skills that would qualify him to be in Class B. Therefore, he believes that the incident at the re-exam was his trick, which he pulled off unnoticed. Subaru is confident that the portal boss was defeated by the Deldoris guild members. But Hinata just laughed in response to his accusations, and didn't want to answer him anything. He had met a guy like that in his previous class, and it seemed like there was someone like Kurimura in every class. Meanwhile, the teacher reminded the students that they would all remain in Class B until the next exam. He also noted that the new students should not relax, as they should always aim for Class A. This year, only one student was able to transfer to Class A, meaning the gap in their skills is still large. Therefore, if they want to join a good guild, they must work out this difference. Subaru asked the teacher what he meant by saying that he thought they were messing around here, and pointed out that the training portal was useless for practice. But, unfortunately, they don't have any other options for practice yet. However, students who advance to Class C and above will now receive a temporary license as proof of their abilities. With a temporary license, students can access Class C and D training portals. It's worth remembering that for this, they will need the support of a guild recognized by Deldoris and the state. The teacher noted that this is a so-called internship. Most guild members were able to gain valuable experience during their school years, but students must remember that it can be life-threatening, but a worthy place is worth all the trials. Hinata thought about the teacher's words. Perhaps he would also be able to get an internship with someone. Akane came to him. Despite the fact that they are in different classes, they remain true friends. She was curious to know how he was doing in Class B, and Hinata replied that he didn't feel quite at ease. Akane had a similar situation. Even though she moved from Class E to Class C, she felt uncomfortable watching her classmates' annoying glances. She also added that she recently encountered a guy similar to Kurimura. Hearing this, Hinata confirmed his theory that there are people like that in every class. Akane also wanted to talk to him about the internship and find out what he thought about it. The girl noted that as an intern, they can receive payment for their activities. Hinata had never heard of this before, so he asked how much money he could make from it. Akane replied that it all depended on the guild and the portal, but even so, the price was high. Much more than for defeating the goblins in the training portal, and they only give 150 yen. Hinata thought it was a great opportunity to earn money, just by going to school and improving his skills at the same time. This will allow him to help his mother and pay Hikari's hospital bills. The growth in the training portal has already reached its limit, so it's time to move on to the next stage. He asked Akane how he could apply for an internship at the guild. Akane replied that recruitment notices were posted on the board in front of each faculty, and she also noticed that the area was always crowded. Hinata was already eager to see the results, but Akane stopped him, saying that the recruitment would be held many more times, but the application selection process was currently underway. So she offered to apply with her after school, and Hinata didn't mind. Sachi appeared next to them, who also wanted to apply with them. The boys were surprised by her presence and asked what she was doing there. Sachi replied that her class was next to theirs, so there was nothing strange about her presence there. She also noted that Hinata was finally able to prove himself, and now they can work together. So she wanted to apply together, but Hinata said no. Sachi was disappointed and didn't understand why he was turning her down. Hinata replied that he couldn't train with her, and they would definitely fail the qualifying round. Subaru was also watching them, and was surprised to see Sachi next to the newly transferred boy. He wanted to know what she was doing here, and how she was connected to Hinata. He intended to enter the same guild where Hinata would be training, in order to discover his true nature. In the end, Sachi applied to the same place as Akane and Hinata. They applied together to the B-rank guild Elben for the D-rank portal. Upon returning home, Hinata wanted to rest, and hoped that he would be accepted as an intern, since they could only accept 3. Suddenly, the traitor appeared on the bed, and asked if he really needed to worry about this now. Noting that with his current skills, it would be strange to die in such simple conditions, Hinata asked what she was doing here in the real world. She replied that her body was attached to his, so there was nothing strange in her presence. Hinata noted that this was, on the contrary, strange, because at their last meeting she said that they would see each other when he became stronger. The traitor explained that she had simply answered his question then, saying that he needed to become stronger, but that this was not necessary to meet her. Since his growth had slowed down significantly, she decided to intervene. But Hinata was more surprised that the girl was able to pick up a book. She said there was nothing surprising about this, since artifacts emerge from nothing and can interact with physical objects. Despite this, Hinata still asked her who she really was. The girl replied that she had already introduced herself as a nameless traitor, but if he wanted to call her by her name, she wouldn't mind. So if it makes him feel better, from now on he can call her Nanashi, which also means nameless. The next day, Hinata was quite worried, and Akane became curious about what had happened to him. However, he replied that everything was fine, not wanting to reveal Nanashi's presence. Akane was still worried and asked again if he was lying to her, and in response, Hinata decided to ask her something. He asked if she saw anyone near him, but Akane didn't immediately understand what he was talking about. She was very scared, thinking that there was some invisible monster there. But Hinata calmed her down, saying that it was just a joke. Hinata realized that other people couldn't see Nanashi, nor could he see the system window that had appeared. All this can be seen only by the user, That is, he is alone. Sachi joined them, as if she was already part of their company. Akane told her about Hinata thinking there was someone next to him, and asked if Sachi saw anything there. However, no matter how hard Sachi tried, she couldn't see anyone. Meanwhile, Nanashi was telling Hinata that it was time to train and not sit around doing nothing. Since yesterday, she has been constantly talking about portals and training, saying that with his current skills, he will easily die. But there was something that was bothering Hinata, because yesterday Nanashi mentioned something that was too early for him to know about, since he was still too weak. And Hinata wanted to know what Nanashi was hiding from him. At that moment, Teacher Gonzo approached them to inform them of the results of the applications to the guild. He also noted that he was glad to see the students from Class E who had moved up to Classes B and C. Hinata asked him what happened since he came to them. The teacher explained that he had come to tell them something, since he was responsible for the selected students. These were the responses to the applications for internships at the guild, and Akane and Sachi were successfully accepted. Gonzo said that there were a couple of issues left to resolve, so he was waiting for them after school in the conference room, and Hinata asked, what about him? The teacher replied that Hinata didn't pass, and that a student from Class A was taken instead. And since they needed a strong shooter, they chose Akane. Subaru, who also applied with them, was surprised because he didn't get in either. The teacher also said that leaving halfway would not work, otherwise he would not be able to participate in raids for 6 months. Gonzo added that there is no need to be upset, as other guilds are also recruiting. And along with this, he received a special invitation from the S-rank guild Deldoras. Hinata was very surprised when he learned that he had been invited to intern at such a powerful guild. Despite this, after school, the young man continued to train at the training portal. Nanashi congratulated him on clearing out the monsters in the portal, but she wasn't particularly happy about it. Hinata also completed the quest to collect the Hobgoblin's magic stones. Now even the training portal was no longer a problem for him, and he needed to move somewhere higher. He only needed to increase his strength by 5 more, and then he would be able to freely use the Fury Suit. He asked Nanashi if there was another way to increase his strength, but she replied that it was useless. After all, going into battle in such a state is the same as dooming yourself to death. Nanashi asked him what happened to the eyes that his body had given him. They were talking about those very mysterious eyes of the warrior that helped Hinata defeat the portal boss. They allow you to anticipate enemy movements, which is a pretty useful ability. However, its main drawback is the high energy consumption, so Hinata cannot use it for long yet. Nanashi noted that it was most likely due to his low intelligence, and Hinata asked what exactly that meant. The girl explained that this is the ability to recognize and understand supernatural phenomena. Simply put, it is the power required to activate magic. Hinata was very surprised when he heard about magic, but Nanashi did not share his reaction, because all artifacts are mysterious and powerful. He said he had heard of monsters that could use magic, but he had never seen people capable of it. Nanashi explained to him that with the correct transfer, anyone can use magic, but the talent after the transfer depends on the person. At the moment, Hinata only had 5 magic points, which was extremely low. Upon learning this, Nanashi momentarily hated Hinata for his weakness. She said it looked like she would have to use another method to make it stronger. Nanashi admitted that he could have actually tested himself in the C-rank portal a long time ago. However, he will not be able to fully reveal his abilities there. So it's time to move on to the next level of training by finishing with the school portal. Nanashi said that if Hinata wanted to become stronger, he needed to listen to her carefully. After all, upon entering this portal, he will immediately feel the difference in his skills. Inside, the portal looked like an abandoned room filled with traps. Hinata didn't even have time to realize how an iron rod flew at him, and then hundreds of the same rods, piercing his body again and again. And then he realized that all his previous work and pain were nothing compared to this. He got scared and woke up in the ordinary world, still not understanding what had happened. Nanashi explained that the portal she created only transported his soul, not his physical body. Therefore, while his soul is in the portal, his body remains defenseless. Nanashi laughed, because Hinata's face clearly read unfair. She noted that he should be more modest, because there were many more deaths ahead of him, and with this attitude, he would never become stronger. Although Hinata didn't quite understand her words yet. The girl reminded him that at the beginning of his journey, he couldn't use the impenetrable suit because certain conditions were required to activate it. Hinata assumed that it was about emotions like anger and others, but Nanashi said that those were only part of the conditions. His costume is far from as simple as it seems, and emotions alone cannot achieve strength. Hinata asked if he really needed to clear that portal to awaken the suit. Nanashi replied that he was thinking in the right direction. Since his body is vulnerable while his soul is in the portal, Nanashi suggested changing the training location to a safer one. She said that in order to awaken the suit, Hinata must show strength and put his soul into it. For him, death should not mean anything. His task is to overcome it at any cost. In words, everything sounded easy and inspiring, but in practice, everything turned out to be much more difficult. Hinata died over and over again, and each time it felt new. But despite everything, he continued to get up and return to the portal. Nanashi told him that even if he was tired of all this, he had to overcome himself. He may be afraid of death, but he must face it head-on without giving in to fear. She noted that those who face death are called heroes in this world, and Hinata himself knows this very well. The next day, Hinata looked pretty battered, and that last attempt almost proved fatal for him. That time, everything was different. Real pain and death were not the boundaries he was used to. Even though Nanashi gave in after seeing his doubts and called him a weakling, back in the artifact, he knew he wouldn't truly die. But something inside him was troubling him. And today is the day when he will become a trainee of the Deldoris Guild. Upon entering the trainee meeting hall, Hinata immediately felt the pressure from the other participants. Besides Shizuku, there was also Haito, Hebishima, who was plotting something against Hinata. Present with them was Chloe Budge, who at first glance seemed quiet. Closing the list of trainees from Class A was Akino Heikan. Unlike Hinata, they were all from Class A, which worried him a little. However, another intern turned out to be Subaru, who openly hated him, stating that interning at Deldoris might be too difficult for Hinata. Shizuku asked him why he didn't go with his Class B classmates. Subaru replied that, unlike Hinata, he was in Class B from the start, and his skills were much closer to hers than to Hinata's. Akino told him that it was now clear why Subaru had been in Class B all this time, since he couldn't see the difference in their skills. Subaru was familiar with Akino, as she had also been in Class B before. Akino asked Chloe what he thought about it, and he replied that he wasn't interested, and besides, Subaru wasn't worth his attention. His words touched Subaru, and he already wanted to compare their skills right there. Suddenly, a strange feeling appeared. Hinata felt as if he was pierced by an iron spear, just like back in the portal. Chloe told Subaru that, unlike him, Hinata noticed this feeling, and that was why there was a difference between them. The artifact that Chloe possessed was invisible blades, which is why he was nicknamed the Ghost Shooter. Despite this, Hinata was able to catch one of his blades, and Chloe was greatly surprised to see this. Shizuku noted that Hinata was sweating excessively just by being in the same room with them. So if they continue to act so pathetic, she'd better give up on this internship. In the end, she added that weak people like them were just a burden, and Hinata wanted to answer her. But at that moment, the teacher entered the classroom. It was Teacher Gonzo, who was in charge of selecting the participants, who asked if everyone was there and apologized for calling the group so early, as they only had free time now. Since everyone is already here, he will explain all the details and subtleties, since their internship will begin in a week. Shizuku's words deeply hurt Hinata, and he wanted to prove to her that she was deeply mistaken in thinking he was weak. Returning home, Hinata was angry and demanded that Nanashi open the portal immediately. The girl didn't quite understand where he was in such a hurry and had so much energy. Nanashi asked if it was all because of Shizuku's words, and Hinata was surprised to learn that she heard everything. She called him weak, and he couldn't say anything back, because he really is a coward who is afraid to face her. But despite this, he will not remain inactive because he is considered weak. That's why he won't just back down, but on the contrary, he will become stronger this week. Back in the portal, Hinata continued to hone his skills. This time, he no longer fell for simple traps, and even successfully evaded them. He realized that he shouldn't act rashly. It was better to look around carefully and think before taking a step. After all, everything in the world has a reason, and so do the traps that react to it. In this way, Hinata became better able to distinguish and notice where he was being attacked from. His agility has increased significantly compared to before. Even a few obstacles did not stop him, because he was thinking about how to parry the blow and not running blindly. However, he did not always succeed in this, and if he let his guard down for a moment, he immediately paid for it. He learned to predict the outcome and act proactively, But this was not enough. He still had a lot to learn ahead of him in order to avoid dying at the hands of the enemy. And he continued to train, because he was not going to give up, returning to the portal time after time. Eventually, he reached the portal boss after a long time. At first glance, it seemed that it would be difficult for him to defeat him, because he was the boss himself. However, compared to the trials he had gone through, such a monster was nothing. And as a reward for his efforts, he received the skills Concentration and Ultra Reflex. A week passed, and the long-awaited day of the Deldoris Guild internship arrived. The guild members prepared carefully to avoid any problems. Assistant Guildmaster Sherry was represented by S-rank Vice Guildmaster Hatsuma Jin. He reported to the Guildmaster that everything was ready and they could begin. Jean remarked that she was in a good mood today, and Sherry replied that she was, as she was looking forward to seeing the students. In her opinion, this is exactly the kind of person they have been lacking for a long time. And in conditions of labor shortage, students will be a salvation. Of course, Shizuku was of particular interest, but the guildmaster said that the guy in the suit would also come. Last time, Jin didn't notice anything special about the guy, and judging by how hard he had the first test, he was weaker than any of them. However, the Vice Guildmaster was deeply mistaken in thinking this way about Hinata. Meanwhile, Teacher Gonzo had already brought the students to the internship site. The students showed respect for the guild and expressed gratitude for the opportunity. The aura emanating from Hinata was noticeably different from before. Sherry explained to the students that today they would be entering an unexplored C-rank portal. She is confident that the students have learned this at the academy, and they will, as usual, be divided into 3 teams. Class A will stand forward, as they are the strongest and most capable. 2 boys from Class B will stand in the center along with the Vice Guildmaster. Today they must fight the portal's boss and close it once and for all. Sherry also said that she really hopes for understanding from the students, because this is not training, but a real fight. Shizuku asked if even for the Deldoras the C-rank portal was difficult, and the Guildmaster replied that it was. Their job is to prevent portals from opening and protect the lives of citizens, because in their understanding, there are no incapable people, so they take advantage of every opportunity. Of course, not everyone is like that, because there are those who do this for money and fame. For example, Kureha chose the first, and Shari noted that it was a great honor for them to accept his great-granddaughter. Since everyone understood everything, it was time to move into the portal. Jin asked the guys not to split up, otherwise he would not be able to protect them if anything happened. Even now, Subaru still found time to show his dislike for Hinata once again. Subaru asked the Vice Guildmaster if he was always placed in the center, but he replied that this was not the case at all, since he usually stood at the front. Typically, frontline warriors take out powerful enemies, but the portals are teeming with them. Therefore, one should never let down one's guard because of one's position. Last time, Hinata fought a C-rank boss, and it looks like he'll be facing a slightly stronger enemy this time. It's time to start your internship and prepare for the portal's closure. It was a C-rank portal called the Path to the Hungry Beast, and when the central group entered it, there was a pile of magic crystals lying on the ground. It seemed to be the work of the front line. Subaru was surprised that they made so much noise in the portal so quickly, while Hinata noticed the enemy's sudden attack. He managed to react quickly and fight off the flying threat. It was a cannibalistic monkey, which usually attacks from behind and then attacks in a crowd. However, for the Vice Guildmaster Deldoris, such monsters are nothing. In the blink of an eye, he dispatched the monster with just one swing of his sword, and Hinata realized that was the difference between them. Jin ordered to find the remaining monsters because they must be hiding somewhere nearby. He also noted that the enemy was hiding, and that is why no one could notice it. Meanwhile, Hinata managed to detect him as soon as he entered the portal, which surprised Jin. It seems he was really very wrong about the guy in the suit. Meanwhile, the Elben Guild was in a D-rank portal called the City of Water Spirits. Akane also started her internship at the same time as Hinata, and if Subaru was with Hinata, then Akane had a stronger partner. Coping with the monsters of such a portal was no problem for Sachi with her artifact. Akane was still worried that such a powerful shot would kill her in an instant. Sachi replied that she would never make such a stupid mistake, so they had better quickly close the portal and go back. Because of the power of Sachi's artifact, Akane was unable to take part in the battles herself at all. However, she was more worried about whether Hinata was okay. Meanwhile, Hinata continued to kill monster after monster. If earlier this would have been a huge problem for him, now he did it confidently. Even though Hinata was showing off his skills, Subaru still doubted him. And while Hinata was fighting, he just stood to the side and watched everything. However, this didn't last long, as Subaru didn't want Hinata to take all the glory for himself. Subaru possessed the artifact Hunting Knife, which, if used correctly, could become a serious threat. Their efforts were also noted by Jin, and from the outside, the guys looked good. Subaru was still a bit rough around the edges, but he had plenty of attack power and stamina. While Hinata has little stamina, he is able to make quick decisions. He does not cross his boundaries by rushing forward and always keeps the situation under control. Moreover, his reaction is extremely high, which greatly helps in combat. Jin noted that Hinata reacts faster than some of the team members, and even when it seemed like the crowd was attacking him and pinning him down, he still didn't lose heart. This kind of instinct can only be developed through real battles. The Vice Guildmaster was very interested to know how the boy was able to develop such a sense at such a young age. Perhaps he was originally born with such strong fighting instincts. But the Vice Guildmaster had no idea what Hinata had gone through. During their training with the Nashi, she once asked him what the first thing that comes to mind when he sees it is. And Hinata replied that it seems like it's poisonous. Nanashi said that he hit the nail on the head. So in order to clear the portal, he needs to improve this instinct. A developed sense of danger begins with a simple thought like, there's something there. Therefore, he needs to learn to access each of his 5 senses. With the help of his eyes and ears, he will be able to notice impending danger. In this case, he will be able to repel the threat and counterattack the enemy. Meanwhile, one of the team members approached Jin and asked if he thought there were too many enemies. The Vice Guildmaster noted that this was indeed the case, since everything should have ended after the front line. But something was wrong here. Did he underestimate the C-rank portal, or perhaps something happened in the Guildmaster's group? But that couldn't be the case, because she is one of the top 10 people who possess a 5-star artifact. Therefore, there was no way they could lose to such low-ranking monsters. However, the problem was different. It affected the second group as well. One of the snipers took aim directly at Jin. But suddenly Hinata appeared in front of the site, and the sniper was surprised how he was able to notice him. He was quite far away, but even so, the guy managed to see him and, what's more, attack him. The sniper relayed to command that the mission had failed, and that he would continue observation, awaiting the next opportunity. Jin asked Hinata what happened, to which he replied that it looked like someone was aiming at him. The Vice Guildmaster suggested that it might have been a bandit guild trying to steal the portal's rewards, but attacking an S-rank guild was madness. However, what was even more surprising was that Hinata noticed an enemy that even he himself had not seen. At that moment, one of the guild members shouted out that they were in trouble, and the guildmaster was in danger. Jin couldn't believe it, thinking it was stupid to think that Sherry could have fallen into a trap. Just half an hour ago, everything was going calmly, and nothing foreshadowed trouble. Sherry explained the tactics to the group, saying that frontline soldiers usually leave a few enemies behind. Therefore, they had to spread out in such a way as to stay in touch and finish off the remaining enemies. Shizuku asked if it wasn't dangerous, but Sherry explained that it was allowed in the C-rank portal. Moreover, they were not alone. The Guildmaster Deldoris herself was with them. She could handle monsters of that level on her own. And these were not empty words, otherwise she would not have become a Guildmaster. The artifact that Sherry possessed was truly remarkable. She could easily deal with several enemies with one movement of her hand. The rumors about her incredible strength turned out to be absolutely true. Sherry emphasized that while she could have done everything herself, the heroes were on training, and it was in their best interests to fight monsters. Shizuku noted that the monsters' movements in this portal were completely different from those in D-rank ones, so they had to be careful. The Guildmaster was pleased to see how the boys were doing. At the same time, she became curious why Akino was not participating in the battle. The girl explained that she needed magic crystals to use the artifact. Sherry said she didn't mind if she took a couple from the defeated monsters. Akino wanted to take the most powerful stone among the others, but Sherry stopped her, saying that this one was not allowed. Akino's artifact, Puppeteer, absorbed the crystals of slain monsters, causing her doll to take on their form and allow her to control them. Sherry was surprised to see what kind of artifact the girl possessed, because the ability to control defeated enemies is a great rarity. Even though Akino herself wasn't very strong, increasing the team's size wouldn't hurt. The list of candidates for the guild continued to grow, and choosing a suitable one became increasingly difficult. At that moment, their group was approached by enemies, snipers from the Bandit Guild. Their first target was the Guildmaster, Sherry, and they thought that from a great distance, no one would notice them. However, even at such a distance, it was not difficult for her to detect the enemy. Because of their sense of bloodthirstiness, she was able to detect them without difficulty. It didn't end there. Dozens of enemies started shooting at her, and Sherry ordered the others to stand in her protective circle as there were too many enemies. The connection was down, so she sent one of the guild members to the central group for reinforcements. Shizuku didn't understand what was going on, and Sherry replied that it looked like they were being ambushed. Akino suggested that it was the work of a bandit guild, and Sherry agreed, noting that they had chosen an extremely unfortunate time to attack. If their goal was the reward, they would have waited until the group defeated the boss, since attacking an S-rank guild was too risky. Moreover, the bullets were not from artifacts. Ordinary weapons are useless against opponents armed with artifacts. It seems they were only trying to detain them. But it didn't stop there. It seemed like someone was controlling the monsters and setting them on the group. Sherry couldn't handle both the snipers and the monsters at the same time, so she assigned the fight against the latter to the trainees. The bandits specifically chose the moment of the training for the attack, but their true motives remained unknown, as they surely understood that the plan would fail. Meanwhile, a strange root began to grow under Sherry's feet. The enemies continued to fire at the group, trying to lower their guard. At that moment, the roots quickly enveloped the guildmaster's legs, depriving her of control over the situation. Immediately after that, a magic dart hit her hand, and Sherry didn't understand what it was. When the cannibal monkey attacked her, she thought she could easily defeat it, but the artifact didn't work. It seemed that the dart had paralyzed the artifact's effect, and it was good that Shizuku had repelled the enemy's attack at that moment. The guildmaster also warned the others to take care of their hands, as the enemies possessed technology that could disable artifacts. The boys didn't fully understand how this was possible, because the technology that made it impossible to use the artifact seemed incredible. She replied that her artifact wasn't working, so she would have to rely solely on them for now. There were too many enemies, and the front group's forces were insufficient, so they decided to retreat. But at that moment, someone in the distance was taking aim at Sherry, and it seemed that this was no longer an ordinary sniper. One of the enemies shot her straight from a rocket launcher, because while she was without the artifact, she would not be able to survive. However, at that moment, the central group had already arrived to them, and Hinata, using the skill Revenge in conjunction with Concentration, with its help, he easily deflected a projectile flying straight at the guildmaster. Everyone was surprised, not only by the fact that Hinata was able to repel the attack, but also by the speed with which he did it. Using his eye skill, he discovered that there were about 15 opponents, and realized that he couldn't handle them all. In such a case, the best solution was to lower the enemy's guard, regroup, and wait for reinforcements. This helped the frontline team gain time, and Sherry noted that he was a great help to everyone. Still, she wondered why he came alone, to which Hinata replied that he used one skill that allowed him to get there first, but he couldn't use it anymore. Shizuku, on the contrary, asked him why he came at all. Before that, the Vice Guildmaster told him that Hinata was the fastest of them, so he was the one who was able to get there first. Shizuku asked. He replied that it was Jin's order. Sherry noted that Jin only gives such orders to those she truly trusts. Hinata has really grown up a lot since then, and he's no longer just a guy in a suit. However, he didn't understand why this upset Shizuku so much, since he, on the contrary, saved them. She admitted that it was true, but she was still tormented by a feeling of weakness, because during the battle she was useless and could not do anything. Sherry told her not to say that, because when her artifact was deactivated, her help came in handy. Hinata didn't quite understand what the guildmaster was talking about, and she explained that the enemies had a technique that took away the power of artifacts, so they needed to dodge their shots. Nanashi about this, but he didn't know how to address her, so he decided to whisper into the hand where the artifact was located. Nanashi replied that there was no need to whisper. It was enough to simply ask the question mentally, and she would hear it, adding that the power of the artifact did not come from Sherry's hand. Since magic crystals create space, they leave a mark on the hand, and the resulting artifact depends on the quality of this space. And it looks like it was taken from her, so even if she touches another crystal, the artifact will not return. Nanashi was also amazed at how amazing humans are, while Hinata was more amazed at how anyone could take the artifact away. Heito asked what they were going to do, and if they had a plan. Sherry replied that they should just wait until the Vice Guildmaster came to the rescue, as that would be the most sensible decision. At that moment, their group arrived just in time, and an enraged Jin attacked the enemy from behind. He said they would seriously regret underestimating the Deldoras. The Vice Guildmaster ordered the guild members to attack the enemies so that they could feel the full power of Deldoras. Sherry also warned Jin to be careful of their shots, as they possessed a technique to deactivate artifacts. Shizuku noted that thanks to the reinforcements, it now looked like they would be able to handle them. However, at that moment, something strange happened. Someone seriously injured 2 guild members. The Vice Guildmaster was surprised to see this, and did not immediately understand what had happened. Then someone suddenly attacked him, the moment he let his guard down. Yet, it wasn't easy to break him like the ordinary guild members. But he noticed something strange. The artifact they were attacking him with resembled the one that belonged to Sherry. His suspicions were confirmed. It was the enemy who took the artifact from her. The enemy noted that, as expected from the Vice Guildmaster Deldoris, he easily dealt with the 5-star artifact. Jin suggested that it seemed like they not only knew how to deactivate artifacts, but also how to use them. However, he had no time to think, because the enemy continued to attack. Jin took this as a sign of disrespect and, in a rage, easily repelled all attacks. Moreover, he was able to counterattack the enemy, but he blocked the blow, and someone else appeared behind him. This enemy's shield was similar to the one that belonged to Hinata's father, and at that moment, another enemy took out an artifact pistol. He fired at Jin, who managed to block the shot at the last moment, but still received serious damage. Jin was thrown a fair distance, but Sherry managed to catch him. Hinata realized that there was no way he could make a mistake, considering that the enemy was able to take the artifact and then use it. The shield he has belongs to his father, and this cannot be a coincidence. The enemy approached Jin and said that their client also had his eye on his artifact, so he should give it to him in a good way. Meanwhile, Jin noted that it seemed like their client was a very unpleasant person, since he wanted to get hold of someone else's. He replied that this was not the case at all. It was just that powerful artifacts were now more valuable than any treasure. He also added that their client was smart, because the corpses could also have an artifact left, so they took advantage of this. After numerous experiments on corpses, humanity changed the meaning of life, becoming the most valuable commodity, more valuable than precious stones, and after hearing his words, Hinata understood everything. The shield artifact really belonged to his father. Sherry noted that there had been no previous cases of artifact theft, meaning they must have targeted her first because they were so desperate to get their hands on her. He replied that everything was correct, because even an S-rank guild would have difficulty coping with such a surprise attack. And thanks to this, they could obtain powerful artifacts. Hinata was so angry that he wanted to deal with them with his own hands, but he was stopped by the Sherry artifact. The enemy noted that at first he did not recognize him, but, noticing his suit, he realized that he was the same student. Hinata ignored him, and wanted to ask where he got the shield-shaped artifact from, to finally confirm his theory. But the enemy said that he did not owe him any explanation, adding that it had probably been taken from one of the corpses on which they had been experimenting. Using the skill Concentration, Hinata rushed straight at the enemy, because with this skill, he could temporarily slow down the perception of time in a ratio of 10 to 1. The opponents tried to stop him by using the same artifact they used against Jin, but Hinata was able to dodge the projectile. His reflexes were at a decent level, but it was difficult to resist Sherry's artifact. Sherry noted that he was good, but it was still not enough. He needed to be even faster. Hinata continued to dodge, even though it was sometimes problematic. At the moment when his guard was down, one of the enemies was able to reach him and strike. Immediately after, another opponent used Sherry's artifact in an attempt to finish off Hinata. Jin couldn't allow this to happen and rushed at his opponents to take revenge on them, not only for the guild members, but also for Hinata. However, his attempts were in vain, because it was difficult even for the Vice Guildmaster to resist such a powerful artifact. Deldoris. This was also noted by the enemy who possessed the Sherry artifact, saying that it was all over for them. Suddenly, a couple more enemies appeared behind Jin, but the rest of the group quickly dealt with them. While Jin was targeting the two main enemies, the rest of the guys dealt with the small fry. Meanwhile, Subaru continued to hide, afraid to engage in battle with the others. He thought that if even the Deldoras were powerless here, how could a bunch of students do anything in that case? Haito was of a similar opinion, and decided not to interfere, but to simply watch from the sidelines to see where all this would lead. Everything seemed to be going well, but in an instant, the enemy targeted one of the students, Chloe, attacking him with the Guildmaster's artifact. Shizuku managed to react and block the attack, but the blow was too strong and knocked her off her feet. Just one such shield possesses incredible power, and the enemy has as many as 4 of them. Jin asked them why they were doing this at a time when people were forced to unite against monsters, but in response he heard that greedy people would always exist. As in this case, the soldiers are merely expendable, and the enemy added that Jin himself understands this perfectly well. After all, if you give them powerful artifacts and heal them if they are wounded, they can be sent back into battle. And no matter who fights, it still won't solve the problem of lack of strength. But Hinata categorically disagreed with his words, saying that he was only alive thanks to those he called expendable. And no one in the world can replace these people, nor the emotions of that day and the parting words he received. Thanks to that day and the people who believe in him, he will continue to fight no matter what. Hinata's unwavering will was answered by his suit, transforming his determination and courage into strength. And the suit of courage was now available to him. The enemy was surprised by how the boy's artifact suddenly changed just because of his emotions, saying that Hinata could have avoided death if he had been a little more cooperative. But Hinata replied that he was not afraid of death. What he was most afraid of was losing and ending up on his knees before his opponent. In an instant, with incredible speed, Hinata was behind the enemy and dealt him a powerful blow. The enemy did not expect this, and in rage tried to fight off Hinata, but it was useless. Now the difference between them was no longer what it had been before, and defeating him for Hinata was the same as defeating a low-ranking goblin. Using his speed, he immediately moved to the other opponent the moment he let his guard down. With a powerful blow, he literally slammed him into the stone, releasing all his anger. Sherry, of course, knew that his artifact was capable of transformation, but she was shocked to see how much power Hinata possessed. However, in addition to the two main opponents, there were still a bunch of snipers and other monsters. But even so, thanks to the skill Acceleration, Hinata easily reached them and defeated them. Hinata's skills continued to amaze him. It was as if he had become a completely different person in just a couple of minutes. Subaru continued to look at him from the side and could not believe what he saw. From the very first time they met, he despised him, saying that he was a liar and unworthy of being in Class B. And yet now it is he who is fighting against everyone, while Subaru himself is only watching what is happening. He couldn't believe that even when the Deldoras couldn't handle the enemy, Hinata still didn't give up and continued to fight. Subaru realized that compared to him, he was simply insignificant, and Hinata was actually a difficult guy. This awakened a sense of determination in him, and he too joined the fight. Jin told everyone that without Sherry's artifact, they were no threat, so now was the best time to attack. While everyone continued fighting, Haito and Akino sat to the side, watching what was happening. As a result, the guys managed to catch all the enemies, and they decided that it was all over. Subaru doubted that the handcuffs would be able to hold them, and Shizuku asked if he didn't know anything about it. She explained that the police use these handcuffs to detain criminals, and if they try to use the relic, they will receive a strong electric shock. Shizuku also said that if he didn't know such basic things, maybe he should study harder instead of relying on brute force. Sherry noted that everyone did a great job and managed it, and Jin added that thanks to Hinata, the Guildmaster's artifact was also saved. Hinata himself was far from being in the best condition right now. Just a couple of minutes of using the new suit left him feeling like he was about to die. The Courage suit is draining too much power, which is no surprise since it couldn't even handle the Fury suit, and if Subaru hadn't intervened, things would have ended badly. Despite all this, Shizuku extended her hand to Hinata to help him up. Without understanding why, he apologized to her, and Shizuku asked if he had entered the battle with a well-thought-out plan. But he replied that it was not so. In response to this, Shizuku said that in that case, it would be better for him to leave the academy. Subaru didn't understand why she was acting like this, but Hinata noted that everything was fine. This was her usual state. In any case, Subaru also wanted to apologize to the guy, saying that he himself was not worthy of being in Class B, and asked if Hinata could forgive him for everything he said. Hinata replied that of course he forgives, because he knew from the very beginning that Subaru simply wanted to humiliate him. Besides, he was proud of being in Class B, which meant he worked hard for it, so Hinata understood his anger, even though he himself didn't care. Subaru was overjoyed, because it turned out that Hinata was actually a good guy. Sherry noted that since everything was over, it was time for the thieves to return her artifact, because if they were able to steal it, they could also return it. He replied that he would gladly do so if he could, but he was interrupted by an unknown boy. The guy with green hair said that it was possible, because they could just be reinstalled. This guy turned out to be the head of a gang of thieves, and after these words, he mercilessly killed one of his subordinates. He explained that it was possible to return the artifact, but he had no desire to do so. Sherry asked him who he was, and why he had just killed his ally. Sherry and Jin's bodies seemed to freeze. The pressure was so strong that they couldn't even move a finger. In response to her question, he replied that she shouldn't worry, because he doesn't kill people without reason. And he killed him because he behaved recklessly, because the original orders were to steal the artifact and leave, and if they noticed, just run away. But he decided to use the power he had received as his own, and thereby essentially betrayed the organization. Jin noted that it looked like the cube he picked up contained a Shari artifact. However, he couldn't even move, let alone take it away. The unknown guy also added that this is not the end, because now is the best time to kill them all. And suddenly, swords began to appear from the shadows that could instantly kill the target. He also said that they would soon be able to move, but for now, they were leaving, and thanked them for saving him time by gathering all his comrades in one place. But Jin still didn't understand who this guy was, although it seemed that his artifact allowed him to control shadows. Finally, he said that he would take Jin's artifact along with Sherry's artifact. But Hinata, who had awakened his second wind, did not agree with his intentions and suddenly attacked him from behind, demanding that he leave the artifacts. The enemy did not understand how he could move, much less how he was able to repel an attack from the shadows. Despite this, he managed to dodge Hinata's attack in time, disappearing into the shadows. He suddenly appeared behind Hinata and wanted to attack him, but he expected such a move. Hinata reacted quickly and used his speed to get right behind his opponent. He didn't have time to dodge the blow, as a result of which 2 cubes with artifacts fell out of his hands. Hinata and the boss of the Thieves Guild rushed after the artifacts, hoping to catch the right one. While the enemy was letting his guard down, Jin attacked him from behind, but he was able to dodge. Having taken one of the artifacts, he said that was all and disappeared. In the end, he only stated that he remembered Hinata's face and was looking forward to their next meeting. The Thieves Guild managed to escape, and Jin was furious that they had not been able to defeat them. He also apologized to Hinata for having to save him again. Hinata's strength was at its limit. After his second awakening, he could barely stand on his feet. Sherry noted that he was exhausted, and no longer the, quote, guy in the suit who retreats at a critical moment. This means that at the moment he saved her, he couldn't use all his skills and didn't become stronger at the last moment. But even if it was all about the artifact, it didn't change the fact that Hinata was a very interesting guy. Later, at the Kansai headquarters during the Guild Alliance meeting, Sherry reported on the incident. Kyoto noted that the theft of the artifact is an unprecedented case. The Minister of Defense agreed, adding that a solution needed to be found urgently. Sherry explained that to avoid a repeat, it was enough to protect the hand where the artifact was located, because the enemy would not be able to steal it without this. Shio remarked that he seemed to know a guy who controlled shadows. That man was a criminal from the S-rank guild Niflheim, whose boss was rumored to have such power. Lin Ping noted that they were having more and more problems each time. Meanwhile, Genji asked Sherry what she was going to do next, since she couldn't stay without the artifact. Shio wanted to object, but Sherry replied that she understood everything without his words. Now her artifact no longer belongs to her, and it is unknown whether she will get it back. Therefore, Hatsuma Jin will take over the management of the Deldora's Guild. She herself will resign, but she will not be idle, because she still has things to do. And she had a special request to the director of the Valkyrie School. She wanted to ask for a favor. At a general meeting of the Academy's students, an important change in the teaching staff was announced. A temporary employee will join the teaching staff starting today. Their new martial arts teacher will be a former guild master. Deldoris, Shari Truman. 2 days have already passed since I completed the portal as an intern. Hinata received a huge amount of magic crystals as a reward, even more than he expected. Nanashi asked him why he was so worried, and Hinata replied that he was thinking of selling them to pay his mother's hospital bills. She told him that he still wouldn't be able to absorb them all, no matter how much he wanted to. And it turned out to be true. When Hinata tried to use the largest crystal, he failed because he had not yet defeated the Earth Mage. Hinata was surprised to realize that he wouldn't be able to cheat the system. Nanashi confirmed that this was indeed the case, and, as she had said before, until he put his heart into the power, the suit would not reach its full potential. Back then, he was only able to activate it because he was fighting a strong opponent. But in the end, Hinata still passed out from excessive energy consumption. According to the updates, the Courage suit enhances physical parameters, especially speed. If he hadn't revealed the suit's power back then, he would most likely have simply died. Therefore, to avoid something like this in the future, he needs to become stronger. Hinata absorbed a lot of crystals, thanks to which he was able to increase his characteristics. Now he could safely use the Fury suit, and in addition, he discovered a new skill, Power of Fury. Nanashi was happy to watch him grow stronger. Another day at the academy continued to surprise Hinata, and he thought that the strangest news would be that Sherry became a teacher. But that was not the case. The former head of Class B announced that Sherry Truman would be the head of class from that day forward. Subaru didn't quite understand how she managed to become a leader in just a couple of days. He also didn't understand why she chose their class and not Class A, since he was much stronger than them. Meanwhile, it seemed that she was targeting their class for a reason. Moreover, she was targeting someone specific. And the main reason why she became their leader was Hinata himself. However, Hinata himself did not understand what had attracted her attention so much, and whether it was because of the cube. Then he asked if he could keep the cube with the shield artifact for himself, without any malicious intent. He explained that this artifact belonged to someone dear to him. But Sherry refused, saying that the subject was too important for research. But despite this, she then promised that she would treat him with care. Still, it would be stupid to be upset about it, so Hinata didn't understand what was wrong, because he had never waited for lunch break to hide from Sherry's eyes before. Meanwhile, during lunch break, Chloe and Akino from Class A met, and Chloe wanted to ask her something. Akino was very surprised and embarrassed when he called her by name. Chloe was interested to know from her about Hinata, what she thought of him and what impression he made on her. Akino replied that she found him pathetic, but Chloe replied that she didn't mean his looks, but his strength. He asked her who she thought would win if he fought him. Without thinking twice, Akino replied that of course he would have won, with a landslide victory. But that was not the answer Chloe wanted to hear. After all, if you compare their skills, even without special strength, Hinata's speed of movement surpassed his. Haito joined them, asking Chloe why he didn't challenge Hinata to a fight then, since fighting people interested him much more than fighting monsters. He noted that such an opportunity will arise, as the Academy's military festival will take place very soon. During lunch break, Akane and Sachi also wanted to see Hinata. Akane was curious to know how his internship went, but Subaru answered instead of Hinata, saying it was incredible. Akane didn't quite understand who Subaru was, so she decided to find out everything from Hinata himself. And suddenly Subaru asked them to accept him into their team. But Sachi told him that no way, and Subaru didn't understand the reason. She explained that he was too pushy and abrupt, so he was not suitable for them. After which, a small conflict arose between them. Hinata was also interested to know how Akane's internship went. But, unfortunately, Sachi took all the glory again, as expected. However, something else was bothering Akane. The feeling that someone was watching them. She asked Hinata if he knew the two strangers hiding behind the door with a scary aura. Akane noted that they had been keeping an eye on him ever since she and Sachi came to them, and she was interested to know why they had such a special interest in him. Subaru emphasized that Hinata was like a target today, first by Miss Sherry, and now by someone else. And suddenly he shouted to the two of them to hide better, because they were easy to recognize. They turned out to be the guys from Class A, and Hinata was of particular interest to them. Sachi noted that the guy with glasses was Deba, a senior from Class A who was competing for first place among the second years. Hinata didn't really understand why he had attracted the attention of another student from Class A. They came here to invite Hinata to their magical item research club. The guys tried to lure him in various ways, even saying that after joining, his fighting power would increase to 3 million. Akane asked Subaru if he was also going to join the club, but he replied that he wasn't, as it was already late in the year. However, Hinata turned them down as he was not interested in joining the club. Sherry suddenly approached them, offering Hinata to at least take a look at the club room. She was sure that it was worth it, and that he would change his mind about his decision. Subaru didn't quite understand why she was acting like a real teacher, even though she had only become one this morning. However, after school, the boys still visited the club room. The room was in a real mess, but despite this, it was full of magical objects. Hinata asked if they were the only ones in the club, and Deba replied something like that. But first, they wanted to introduce themselves. Deba Mitsuru, a second year from Class A and the club president, and next to him, Nishikori Miho, a second year from Class C. Mitsuru noted that initially there were 3 of them in the club, but one member left the group. It was Shu who left the club after being expelled. Everyone knows that their academy is a military school, so most students join here for training, and there are a few clubs here. Most of them focus on skill practice, like a martial arts club. Therefore, when it comes to cultural clubs, such as the Magical Item Research Club, it is one of a kind. Subaru noted that if the student had initially wanted to do something ordinary, like club activities, he would not have entered the academy. Mitsuru replied that that was exactly it, which was why their club wasn't popular at all, and they didn't even have a promoter. Hinata asked if the club could become popular without a promoter, and Miho replied that there was one, but he left last year. However, they managed to continue their club activities, albeit unofficially. The director recently said that the academy can no longer fund a club without a promoter if there are only 2 people in it, so they will have to give back the club room. Akane asked if that was why they asked Teacher Sherry to be their promoter. And it turned out to be true. Sherry herself was not against it, provided that they invited Hinata to the club. But Hinata didn't understand why him, and the teacher replied that she thought he might need the cube with the artifact. She noted that magical items are devices that absorb the energy of magical crystals. Their power is immense, and as weapons they can be effective even against monsters from other worlds. However, In real combat, they are used quite rarely because they are inferior to artifacts in many ways. Magic items cannot compare in power even to single-star artifacts, but this cube has challenged that belief. Sherry explained that the object she was holding was an object that could possess and steal someone's artifact. For now, they have decided not to disclose it to the public, but it is still necessary to come up with and take measures. The teacher said that they had discovered untapped potential in the magical item that they had yet to explore, so it seemed that in the future, more than just artifacts would be used in battles. Mitsuru added that this is not all, because magical items also make dreams come true and open up new possibilities. For example, this suit is a durable armor that absorbs the energy of magical crystals. But despite its power, this armor is practically unsuitable for use. But with proper development, it will be possible to use it. Akane asked how exactly, and Mitsuru replied that it could be used to make a super robot. Subaru and Hinata were beside themselves with surprise. She wasn't surprised by the guy's reaction, since they probably like this kind of thing. But Sachi's reaction surprised her. Sherry noted that she doesn't know much about robots, but would like Hinata to join the club. And, to be honest, she would like to train Hinata personally. Given the secrets of his artifact, if they manage to figure out how to extract the artifact from the cube, the club will be able to give it to Hinata as a bonus. Therefore, she would really like him to join. But if he is against it, she will not force him. Akane noted that it actually sounded good, and the festival was approaching. There is a festival between military academies where team battles will be held, and it would be a lot of fun to participate in it with the club members. Akane and Sherry's words managed to convince Hinata, and he replied that he agreed to join the club. Upon returning home, Hinata continued his training in the Spirit World portal. He was able to reach another final stage of the portal, but he ran into difficulties. No matter how he tried to attack the monsters, it was all in vain. He was fast and could dodge their attacks, but he still lacked strength. Hinata even used a combination of the skills Revenge and Fist of Fury, but it didn't work. Ultimately, failure awaited him, followed by another death. Hinata didn't understand what he was doing wrong, and where he could get more attack power. Besides, he lacked stamina, which is why he couldn't use the courage suit for a long time. Nanashi noted that he was doing badly. She thought he had grown a little, but he still had room for improvement. She also said that he lacked something, namely, special equipment. When he uses the new suit, even for a short time, he becomes stronger than most opponents, but this only applies to those he can damage. Therefore, against more resilient opponents, he is still powerless, and no matter how strong he is, he will not be able to defeat them. But even Hinata didn't quite understand what to do. But perhaps the update list would help him with this. Nanashi replied that it wouldn't help, and even learning a new skill wouldn't help him. The problem is that the power that the artifact can store is unchangeable. That's why he needs a technique like Shizuku's, which she has already mastered. Her artifact fills objects with vital energy, which increases their characteristics. However, instead of filling items, it converts this energy into attack. It can be called a special technique that uses the characteristics of the artifact, so he must also learn the power of his artifact and master his own unique technique. The next day, Hinata continued to think about Nanashi's words. A unique technique. It's not about combining skills and activating them, because he already used them, and it didn't work. Hinata's appearance. Subaru thought that something had happened to him, but Hinata replied that everything was fine. He was just thinking about a unique technique. But Subaru didn't understand what he was talking about, thinking that he hadn't woken up yet. Meanwhile, the teachers entered the classroom to make an important announcement. Students are probably already aware of the festival that will take place later this month, where each of their progress will be assessed. That's the official statement, but in essence, it's just a normal school festival, so they can have fun. They're just students after all. This year's festival will be held in a spherical dome with a D-rank portal, and ordinary citizens will also be present, so students must behave respectfully. Subaru asked if they were just actors at the festival, but Sherry said it was gratitude for the citizens' support. Hinata inquired about how exactly their progress would be checked at the festival. Sherry explained to the students that there would be two events at the festival: individual battles and team battles. In individual battles, you can participate at your own discretion. However, team battles require membership in some club. The rules are mostly the same as for the final test, but there are additional ones for each year. Unfortunately, they will remain unknown until the event begins, so students will have to be patient. This worried the students because it looked dangerous, but Sherry assured them that everything would be fine. But just like at the final test, there would be security at the festival. Meanwhile, the Magical Item Research Club began its preparations for the festival. Akane was curious to know what exactly they would do at the festival. Mitsuru explained that the use of magic items was allowed for team battles at the festival, so if they could create a strong magic item now, they would have an advantage. They also planned to open a kiosk to raise funds to support the club. Akane asked what they sold last year, and Miho replied that they made yakisoba back then. Their kiosk looked quite interesting, and people were interested in watching the robot cook. However, it eventually exploded and caused a great deal of commotion. Akane noted that her artifact was only good for long-range combat, so she would like to obtain a magical item that would help her fight in close combat. Sachi, despite not being a member of any club, was still with the guys, and Subaru didn't understand why. But Mitsuru suggested that the guys listen to a short lecture on the abilities of magical items for beginners. But first, it would be nice if Hinata called Miss Sherry here. Since they couldn't continue without a promoter, Hinata agreed, and Akane decided to go with him. On the way, Akane seemed to want to talk to him about something, but their dialogue was interrupted by strange screams. Several students from another school seemed to have started a fight right in the academy. Akane noted that these were guys from a military school, and Hinata noticed someone among them who looked like an old acquaintance of hers. The guys seemed to be saying something about the festival and the points that are awarded for participation. It seemed like it was just a verbal conflict. Akane and Hinata couldn't just continue watching it. The girl, along with them, noted that this was too much, but the guy didn't care. He continued to pester the girl, grabbing her by the hair, saying that her actions could harm his reputation. It seemed like he wasn't very keen on her taking part in the festival since she was from Class D. He tried his best to force her to refuse to participate in the festival, but the girl did not want to. This made him even more angry. He didn't understand why she didn't refuse. Did she really need the points at the festival that much? The guy was so angry that he wanted to hit her again. However, at that moment, Hinata intervened and literally slammed the offender face into the ground. The girl was surprised when she saw Hinata and didn't even recognize him right away. The guy he hit wasn't happy about it and asked Hinata who he was to mess with him. He tried to punch him back, but it was no use, and Hinata was able to block his fist. Hinata introduced himself as an acquaintance of the girl he had just hit, and he would like to hear an apology to her. For what he did, the offender did not understand where he got such strength from, because of which he could not even move his hand. However, the girl replied that everything was fine, and besides, it was her problem. She gave him the papers and told him to leave, and if they asked why he was late, to answer that it was because of her. But Hinata wasn't sure that everything would really be okay. But the girl replied that she didn't want to cause a commotion and therefore lose points. Despite this, Hinata didn't quite understand why she was so worried about them. The girl thanked him for his help, noting that he was, as always, fair. Akane, who was watching all this from the side, did not quite understand what kind of relationship Hinata had with this girl, so she decided to ask Hinata what his relationship was with her. Hinata replied that the girl's name was Rin, and they were old acquaintances, just like with Shizuku. Hearing Shizuku's name, Rin wasn't very happy, saying that it seemed like she was working hard as well, calling her stupid. But Hinata didn't quite understand what exactly Rin meant, but he didn't have the opportunity to ask about it. The girl said that it was time for her to leave, and she would be glad to meet him again at the festival. Meanwhile, upon returning to the Magic Item Research Club, Hinata told Sherry about what happened. However, what she was most interested in was whether Hinata had been able to adequately beat up his bullies, to which Subaru replied that it was unlikely that a teacher should say such a thing. Mitsuru noted that they must have been students from the One Military Academy, or ODI Academy for short, since they were the only ones who could study under the outdated point system. The teacher explained to the children that, unlike them, in ODI, the class is changed depending on the scores. That's why they try to study harder, and they graduate from the academy with exceptionally talented people. However, the students of this academy do not get along very well with each other. And Akane and Hinata were able to see this for themselves, seeing everything with their own eyes. Sherry noted that even in Deldoris, there are several Audi graduates, and many of them often refuse to work on the team. Some even set each other up to climb to the top. And Mitsuru added that this is precisely why many schools have abandoned such a grading system. As for someone setting someone up for the sake of reaching the top, Akane noted that Valkyrie is no better than them. Sherry asked Hinata if Rin would take part in the festival, since the organizers could also participate in team battles, and she was one of them. In that case, she will be a formidable opponent, because the ODI Academy will certainly try by all means to get a victory for the sake of points. Miho said in a confident voice that they would never lose and would definitely win. After all, if they show better results in team battles, their club's funding will increase. However, Hinata didn't quite understand what Miss Sherry meant by formidable opponent. Meanwhile, Rin and Shizuku's paths crossed completely by chance. The atmosphere around them was not the best, and they did not even greet each other. The only thing Rin said then was calling Shizuku a murderer. Looking at her uniform, Shizuku realized that Rin had also entered a military academy, but a different one. Thanks to this, she became even more convinced that she was right. Meanwhile, in the classroom at Odi Academy, the group gathered to discuss the upcoming festival. The guy who had raised his hand to her back then was still angry and wanted to ask her how she dared to humiliate him like that. He wanted to know who the guy who beat him was and whether he was her friend. But Rin continued to ignore him, and in response to this, he decided to hit her again. But this time, she strangely dodged. Moreover, she was able to strike back with ease, as if slowing down time. It did seem strange, but Rin only said that it was because he hit her earlier. One of the guys from the group noted that the girl had been pretending before and had not dodged the blow on purpose. Otherwise, how could a person like her, who could dodge any attack, trip and scatter papers? But Rin only replied that she simply saw the person she had long wanted to see. Besides, when it comes to a person you care about, you always want to show your weak side. She also noted that she was pleasantly surprised because back then, Hinata was quite strong and cool. The girl sitting next to them didn't understand what they were talking about, since Rin was only from Class D. However, this was not entirely true. She had recently transferred to a new academy, so due to her lack of points, she was placed in Class D. This girl is Takamine Rin, a former student of Class A at OZ Academy who owns a 4-star artifact. Meanwhile, at the Valkyrie Academy, everything went on as usual. Hinata continued to work hard to hone his artifact skills, but now with the help of Sherry. Sachi always felt like his aura changed every time they met. And this time, it was nothing like before. Hinata had been honing every single one of his suits, including the Wrath suit, which he seemed to have completely mastered. His next training step was to hit as hard as possible without using any other skills. Hinata managed to score 1,258 points, and Sherry noted that with such immense power, he could finish off a D-rank enemy with one hit. Thanks to these trainings, Sherry was able to find out the rank of Hinata's artifact, and based on the data, its current rank is 3 stars. Akane couldn't believe it, saying he should have at least 4, if only because of his crazy sideways jumps. But Sherry replied that although his speed was truly impressive, his artifact rank was only 3 stars. Subaru was also surprised, because his artifact was of the same rank, and also began to think that such an assessment was not entirely accurate, while Akane's artifact rank was only 2 stars. Sachi, on the other hand, agreed with the ranking system since she possessed a 4-star artifact, but Akane denied it, saying that she could really defeat Hinata now. She replied that Akane was right. If she fought him now, she would most likely lose, but the artifacts were not valued by defeating her. Miss Cherie added that the artifacts were created not to fight each other, but to prevent disasters caused by beings from other dimensions. What matters is how effective they are against these creatures, not against humans, and this determines the rank of the artifact. Hinata's artifact rating is so low. However, for Hinata's artifact, rank has no meaning. Sherry noted that Hinata's suit most likely replenishes its energy through stamina, and Hinata responded that it did. In that case, he should focus on developing endurance, which will help him prevent what happened recently. Hinata completely agreed with her, because the basic characteristics for the new suit were indeed lacking. To become even stronger and more resilient, Hinata will have to train a lot. For example, running 5,000 laps around the field, which Subaru considered crazy, thinking that Hinata would die faster that way. Before continuing training, Hinata would like to discuss one more thing regarding the unique technique, such as the finishing blow. Sherry told him that usually the artifact uses its inherent properties, as Nanashi had already said. In Hinata's case, he needs a technique that releases all of his accumulated power in one strike. Something like the Fist of Fury technique he got after unlocking the Fury suit. However, he wasn't sure if it was worth using, as he could only make a couple of hits. But after looking at the list of upgrades, he noticed that Fist of Fury now released all its accumulated power in one hit. Meanwhile, Shizuku continued to train diligently. While Hinata improved his basic stats, she learned to spot the enemy before they could attack. But she constantly believed that she was doing poorly and that she needed to train even more and focus even more on the task. At that moment, strange thoughts crept into her head, reminding her of her past. At the same time, she remembered Rin's last words, who called her a murderer. But suddenly, her training was interrupted by a powerful explosion. The one who arranged it was Haito, who was also training in the portal at that time. She asked what he wanted since he came here, and Haito replied that he came to ask her out on a date. But Shizuku refused, saying that he was not her type. But it was just a joke. In fact, he came to invite her to join the team battle at the festival. He noted that Chloe also wants to participate, because it seems like there will be someone on the team with whom he wants to compete. Haito said that it was a good idea to take part because, like last time, a situation might arise where they would have to fight with people. Therefore, he noted that it is important to be prepared for a fight with a person. Shizuku agreed to take part despite all the differences. She was sure that Haito's words about the battle between people and Rin's appearance were not at all random. Shizuku also said that if he participated, he would definitely win, so he needed to be prepared. However, Haito had his own plans, but he did not reveal them, and only replied that he would be glad to win with her on the team. Meanwhile, Hinata continued training inside Nanashi's portal, trying to defeat the monsters again and hone his finishing move. And it seems that the training under Sherry's guidance paid off, because he finally managed to defeat the monsters, although it took a lot of effort. The day before the festival, the guys came to look at their club stand. They were a little disoriented, but Mitsuru and Miho noticed them and shouted to come to them. Akane noted that they really chose a great location at the festival, but this place became available thanks to Miss Sherry's connections. Mitsuru was surprised when he didn't see Sachi with them and asked where she was. Subaru replied that since she wasn't a member of their club, she said she would focus on tasting the treats. In any case, the festival will take place tomorrow, and this year the Valkyrie, Odin, and Thor academies will join forces. Team battles will take place on the first day, and individual battles on the second. Sherry told the kids that the rules for team battles were on the printout they had been given yesterday, so it would be a good idea to review them. A team of 4 must collect as many crystals as possible and place them in a magical item to earn points. The team with the most points wins, so they will also have to compete against other teams. Each team member will have bracelets on their arms and legs. These are some kind of magical objects, each weighing 30 kilograms, and one of the team members must guard the capsule. The rest will attach 2 balls to their bodies, which will be their main weapons. Each time the balloon bursts, the bracelets increase their weight by 5 kilograms. Subaru asked if it was acceptable for them to have 30 kilograms on their arms and legs. It would be impossible to move with that kind of weight. Sherry added that if both of their balloons burst, they would be disqualified and would have to leave the portal immediately. Mitsuru noted that they first needed to deal with the opposing team's balls, and then with the capsule. Some teams will likely be eager to fight, so if a representative fails to defend the capsule, the team is finished. Sherry also told them that to avoid this, the strongest member of the team should become the representative. The clear favorite for this place, of course, was none other than Hinata. On the day of the festival, the square looked very lively. The number of people was simply incredible. This event is held annually, but this year, tickets were given away in a lottery. The program's ratings have become very high, which confirms the festival's popularity. Meanwhile, the guys were preparing for the team battle, but in a peculiar way. Subaru asked if Miho was sure she didn't want to participate with them, but she replied that it was okay, since her artifact wasn't suitable for something like that. So she decided to focus on earning money for their club, although Akane was worried about whether she could handle it alone. Miho replied that there was no need to worry, since Hinata had said that he would bring one assistant to her, and this assistant was his younger sister, Hikari, who just happened to come to the festival. However, Hinata asked her not to push herself too hard, as this was the first time in a long time that she had visited such an active place. Akane was very surprised when she learned that Hinata had a younger sister. He replied that it was true, but she had just spent some time in the hospital. But despite this, she would soon recover, and the doctors were not against letting her go. Meanwhile, the team battles were announced to begin soon, and the students were asked to gather at the entrance to the portal. Hinata apologized to Hikari for not having time to talk because they had to go, but it was okay, since Hikari had come here to help. So from that time on, Hikari was completely under Miho's responsibility. The guys headed towards the portal so as not to be late and not miss the battles. Hikari also applied to the academy and will be able to study next year, but Hinata didn't know about this yet. On the way to the portal, they met Shizuku's group, but their welcome was not the warmest. Seeing Hinata next to Mitsuru, she said that Hinata really did join the Magical Item Research Club. The atmosphere around her was quite unpleasant, but Hinata asked if she would participate in the team battle. Shizuku replied that yes, she was invited, and if she participated, she would definitely win. Even though it's just a regular festival, why not show off your skills again? Her behavior made the boys even more angry, and they didn't understand why she was acting with them as if they had already lost. But Shizuku only replied that they had no chance, and she truly felt sorry for Mitsuru for his team. Mitsuru replied that this was not the case, because in a team battle, it was not only strength that was important. First and foremost, it was a test of trust between team members. And since their captain is a good and reliable man, he is confident that their strength will exceed all her expectations. However, Shizuku had a completely different opinion, stating that the only thing that was important was a reliable force that would not drag the team down. At this time, Miss Sherry announced the start of tag team battles, and most were surprised to learn that she had actually retired. She also said that even though it is a festival, one should not forget about safety. So in an emergency, participants can rely on Deldoras. They have neutralized the portal's bosses, so it is important for the participants not to damage its base. Participants will have an hour, and for the first 10 minutes, combat between teams is prohibited, as is killing. They only need to destroy the opponent's balls. If they cause serious injury to anyone, they will be disqualified. So you have to fight smart. Now that everyone understands everything, there is no point in delaying anyone. It's time to get started. After this, all teams rushed into the portal to take advantageous positions as quickly as possible. It was just a D-rank portal called Giant Branch Forest, so defeating the local monsters wasn't difficult for the boys. Besides, thanks to Hinata's suit, he seemed to be able to handle the task alone. However, the suit still drained him greatly, and he couldn't use it for long. Mitsuru asked what the situation was like, and Hinata replied that there was no one around, but they should remain vigilant. 10 minutes have passed since entering the portal, and now a collision with other participants may occur. In team battles, it's best to avoid clashes and instead focus on collecting magic crystals. The guys wanted to believe that they would be able to get through this festival peacefully. However, at that moment, the ball on Akane's right hand burst. Someone shot at him from a very long distance. These were the guys from the One Academy, who were targeting not only the team, but also Hinata. The spectators were delighted that after 10 minutes, one of the teams was already attacking the other. Sherry wasn't thrilled, reminding them that she'd asked them to be more careful. But Jean pointed out that there was nothing they could do about it. Hinata was unable to react to the attack, meaning they were in possession of some sort of artifact. Teacher Gonzo also noted that it was truly impressive. The shooter was Hanasaki Reiko from Class B of the Academy 1. She was quite accurate, and her artifact did not even make a sound. She was truly a silent sniper. Sherry noted that it seemed like the students at this academy specialized in combat abilities, but now Hinata and the others understood their situation. Meanwhile, Jin continued to monitor the situation to ensure that no incidents occurred. He had to be sure that something like what happened at the re-exam would not happen again. But something was bothering him, and his worries turned out to be justified. Suddenly, the portal's base cracked, but, unfortunately, no one was able to notice it. But the guys from the Odin Academy weren't going to stop there and wanted to burst as many of their opponents' balloons as possible. Their main target was Hinata, especially because of what happened the other day. Watching through binoculars, they also spotted Mitsuru, and despite him being a second year from Class A, they didn't think he was a strong opponent. However, they suddenly disappeared from sight after using a magic item, and Reiko was unable to aim properly. At that moment, they heard a strange sound that seemed to come from behind. And they weren't imagining it because, having lowered their guard, they immediately found themselves in Hinata's field of vision. They couldn't believe how he managed to get to them so quickly, because just a second ago, he was several hundred meters away from them. He managed to burst the balloon of one of his opponents before they could escape. Of course, Hinata couldn't let them go and rushed after them, but certain difficulties arose. The boys weren't stupid either, and had prepared in advance, setting up traps around them made of thin threads, the breaking of which could lead to death. Because of these threads, Hinata wouldn't be able to move freely, no matter how fast he was. The guy noted that this was all thanks to his 3-star artifact, Territory Expansion. At that moment, he was able to release another thread, and if Hinata had slowed down even for a second, he would have been dead. Thanks to this trick, they were able to trap him. Or so they thought. In fact, Subaru came to Hinata's aid and easily cut the threads with his knife. Since their attention was only focused on Hinata, they forgot about the other members of his team. This turned out to be a mistake, which allowed the boys to easily surround them. This was far from what the guys from the Odin Academy expected. They didn't think that their opponents would have an artifact capable of cutting such invisible threads. However, except for Mitsura, everyone was sure that he was somewhere nearby. although Hinata did not know where he was. Mitsuru, meanwhile, was fighting another member of the Odin Academy, asking the others to trust him. Therefore, it was now important for the boys to complete their task without losing the ball. Hinata noted that since these were the students from the One Academy, whom he had seen before, then Rin should be somewhere here too. At first, he thought she would fight Mitsuru, but he was sure she was nearby, even though he couldn't sense her presence. And his suspicions were correct. Rin was right behind him. He was only able to notice her at the last minute, and it seemed that she knew about his attention. She immediately attacked Subaru, bursting 2 of his balloons at once and thus disqualifying him. No one had time to understand what had happened, but Rin only said that in the end, it was all a competition. Hinata didn't expect Rin to appear so suddenly, and with such an attack. Akane threw a magical item at the boys, which was a kind of smoke grenade, to buy them time to regroup. While the enemies were letting their guard down, Hinata grabbed Akane and started running. Akane didn't understand why he was running away, but Hinata replied that it was important for them to increase their distance now. Besides, without Subaru's artifact, he wouldn't have been able to deal with that guy's artifact. Hinata acted rather carelessly when he launched his attack, but he didn't understand how Rin was able to get so close to them. Rin was also impressed, as she tried to hide her presence, but Hinata still sensed her. Subaru asked if the knife was her artifact, to which Rin replied that it was not. This knife wasn't even capable of cutting through a normal school uniform, but it was enough to pop the balloon, although Subaru didn't understand how she managed to get so close. Rin replied that she had been here from the very beginning, and it was the other way around that they had shortened the distance and come to her. The other members of her team thought that she would run after Hinata and Akane, but she had other plans. After all, even if they catch them, it doesn't really matter. It's much more interesting to find the rest. Meanwhile, Hinata and Akane walked straight into Chloe and Akino's arms, who were just hunting them. At this time, Shizuku and Haito went together, and she didn't understand what Chloe and Akino were thinking. Haito replied that they were simply more focused on their personal rivals than on the team battle. She also asked Haito who his opponent was then, and he immediately replied that it was Hinata. Shizuku noted that this was the right thing to do, since someone had to teach him a lesson. He completely forgot that their goal was not victory at any cost, but that one defeat could mean losing everything. This is why you can't win recklessly by rushing into battle, because you could die. Shizuku also said that weaklings should be among weaklings instead of trying to climb to the top. And suddenly Rin approached them, noting that Shizuku's words about a single defeat were true. But if that was the case, then why was Shizuku still alive? That was what she wanted to know. Rin replied that it was because Shizuku was a rare creature who would take any chance to survive. Shizuku asked Haito not to come any closer, telling Rin that if she was a beast, then she was one too. After all, she couldn't do anything herself, but she still continued to blame others. These words angered her. Rin rushed into battle without any hesitation, heading straight for Shizuku. However, just like with Hinata, she was unable to defeat or outsmart Shizuka. Unlike Hinata, Shizuku had a more powerful attack power that Rin found difficult to handle. Shizuku noted that Rin can see into the future for a period of 4 to 5 seconds. Rin replied that it was, and she expected nothing less from Shizuku. Rin's artifact is Reverse Vision, which significantly enhances her physical abilities and allows her to predict the future. It's truly one of the best support artifacts, but even if it can predict the future, without the ability to respond to an attack, it's useless. However, Shizuku was deeply mistaken in thinking so lightly about Rin's artifact. She can see 5 seconds into the future only if she is not involved in combat, in which case her predictions become significantly more accurate. And Shizuku didn't even notice how Rin was able to burst 2 balloons, effectively turning her into a walking anchor. Haito watched the proceedings and wondered if the artifact would cause trouble for Rin. At that moment, Rin looked straight at him, as if telling him to pretend he hadn't seen anything. Haito immediately understood her hint and took her side, betraying Shizuka. At this time, Mitsuru was also having a hard time. At first glance, his opponent was much stronger. He continued to attack him without stopping, giving him no time to rest. The enemy was confident of his team's victory, but Mitsuru had a completely different opinion, stating that in battle, not only strength, but also luck is important. His team is superior to them in every way, but not all of their balls are broken, and they are far from weak. Suddenly, Mitsuru took out something that looked like a magical item or artifact and stabbed himself with it. The enemy did not expect this and was surprised that Mitsuru used his artifact only now. Mitsuru noted that this was the Hulk steroid artifact, which had a strong but short-lived effect. But now this effect will last until the end of the team fight, and all the efforts of his team will pay off with his fists. The situation between Rin and Shizuku escalated as she now wanted to take revenge on her for everything she had done. On that hellish day, Rin lost everything, and the only thing she had left was her twin sister, Ren. The two of them tried to save themselves, and then it seemed to them that their lives would end right there. Rin then decided that one day she would become stronger and destroy all the creatures from another world to take revenge. But at some point, everything turned out not to be so hopeless when Shizuku and Hinata found them, and they seemed to have hope. That day, they truly met their comrades in misfortune. From then on, they began to study and train together, helping each other overcome difficulties. Shizuku and Rin became real friends, and then it seemed to her that life was gradually getting better. They made it clear that there is no need to despair, even in the most hopeless situations, because a way out can always be found. School days were warm and joyful, and they all gradually began to forget about the tragedy that had happened. However, the horrors did not end there, and before they became warriors, they had to survive another catastrophe. When it seemed that the most terrible and difficult stage was already behind us, life again and again threw up trials. Hinata was able to save Rin, and they escaped the school together. After a while, they saw several more students leaving the school, but neither Rin nor Shizuku were among them. And then, from behind the smoke, Shizuku's silhouette began to emerge, but Ren was not with her. The other children suddenly started blaming Shizuka for everything, saying that she sacrificed everyone to save herself. They screamed that it was she who pushed other children into the arms of monsters. From then on, everyone started to hate her. But Rin still didn't understand where her sister was. She refused to believe the other children's words, considering them lies, and asked Shizuku where Ren was. Shizuku didn't know how to answer, so she simply told the truth. Ren was dead. That day, Rin lost everything. Her last loved one. Meanwhile, Hinata continued to fight Chloe, who was so eager to fight him. Besides Chloe, Akino also intervened in the fight, but this was not a problem for Hinata. Akane helped him fight off the girl with the puppeteer artifact, easily repelling her attacks. Together they worked harmoniously, and their team spirit was high. However, Akino didn't understand why Chloe didn't deal with Akane first, since then they would be able to easily overcome Hinata with numbers. Besides, it was because of her that she lost one ball, and if she loses another one, she will be disqualified. Meanwhile, the thing was that Chloe was having trouble and couldn't get a hit done. Hinata kept dodging his blades, and Chloe couldn't understand how he did it. Hinata also had problems, as the blades prevented him from getting close enough to attack. Chloe knew that Hinata wouldn't be able to counter his blade's attack, so all he had to do was wait for his opponent to open up. However, at that moment, something strange happened. The world around began to distort, as if the portal was starting to close. Nanashi noticed these changes, saying that it was too early for the portal to close, since the stage was not yet complete. Shizuku also felt this strange sensation, but she still didn't understand what was happening. Rin seemed to know something, but didn't say anything, only noting that from this moment on, Shizuku would be in big trouble. At that moment, Haito exploded his balls, and due to their weight, Shizuku was unable to move. She didn't understand why he betrayed her, because at first glance, he seemed like an ordinary guy. Rin noted that they might be mistaken for accomplices, so it might be best for her to leave. But Shizuku didn't want to let her go, and demanded to know what she was going to do. Rin replied that she wasn't going to do anything herself. Haito would do everything for her. He came close enough to her, but Shizuku managed to react and fight back, despite the weight. Haito had expected this, so he had prepared another plan in advance. He had planted an invisible explosive on the balloon of each of the team members. When they all exploded, Shizuku was no longer able to move, as if she was chained to the ground. She understood exactly what he had done, so she asked him what he was planning. Haito replied that he simply blew up Akino and Chloe's balloons with his snake bomb, which is hard to spot if it's well hidden. None of the guys expected this, and they were extremely shocked. However, he did this not only to defeat them, but also to weaken Shizuka. In the end, he was going to take her artifact in the same way that the artifact was taken from Sherry. Shizuku was surprised to realize that it was the same dart that had been aimed at Sherry back then. But Haito said that she shouldn't be so surprised, since there were already bad rumors about him. He added that she must have understood the risks when she allowed him to get so close. Haito also admitted that he had been a member of Nibelheim long before entering the academy. He explained that it was best to steal the artifact before it grew, which is why he was sent here to cover all traces of the festival. That was their plan from the start, and it looks like they've succeeded. Shizuku thought that Rin was involved in this too, but she just said that it had nothing to do with it. she was just a victim who would abandon her and run away. She added that it was like when Shizuku abandoned Rin. Rin also warned that there was no need to expect help, since the others were now in the epicenter of a huge monster outbreak. No one understood what had happened, but one thing was clear. The students in the portal needed to be rescued immediately. Sherry couldn't believe what was happening, because this was the first time something like this had happened. Either her eyes were deceiving her, or the D-rank portal had turned into a higher tier portal, and the monsters coming out had become B-rank. It became too dangerous near the portal, and Jin told Sherry to get as far away as possible and help the others evacuate. A little more and the monster would have attacked her, but at that moment, Gonzo arrived in time. No one expected this at the festival, and Sherry sincerely hoped that everyone would survive. Meanwhile, Rin said that she would also leave since it was not safe to stay even outside the portal. However, Haito was confused about what kind of monster outbreak the girl was talking about, since the boss had told him something else. But one way or another, he had already stolen Shizuku's artifact, and this could not but please him. The first part of Haito's plan was completed, but he had no intention of stopping there. After all, his plan also included stealing Hinata's artifact, which the guild boss had taken a fancy to. He thought he could pull it off without any trouble, but then everything went wrong. A monster suddenly appeared and attacked him, causing him to drop Shizuku's artifact, which landed right at her feet. Haito didn't understand where the monster got such strength from, because even as a cub, he was a B rank, and he appeared in a D rank portal. At that moment, the head of Nibelheim informed him that the plan was changing, and that he needed to leave immediately. Haito didn't want to retreat, because they had prepared for so long, but the boss ordered him to leave immediately if he didn't want to die. In the end, Haito decided to retreat, telling Shizuku that he didn't intend to kill her, but it seemed her luck had run out. He used a shadow trick to instantly leave the portal. At this time, Shizuku tried to get her artifact back, but it was useless. Besides, the monster was already standing right in front of her, and it seemed to her that this was the end. She thought that perhaps this was payback for that day and her obsession with power. Shizuku was in despair, and it looked like she wouldn't be able to keep the promise she made to Ren. And when it seemed that everything was over, at that moment, Hinata appeared and repelled the monster's attack. Shizuku was shocked to see him, not understanding what he was doing there. Suddenly, Akino's toy, which helps them find each other, came out of her pocket. Hinata said that Chloe gave him this toy, adding that it would help find her. However, Shizuku didn't understand why he came, and not Chloe or Akino. Hinata explained that at first they didn't understand anything either, and didn't know what to do. Akane said that enemies like these usually appear in B-rank portals, but they are in D-rank. Hinata noted that in that case, they had better get out of here as quickly as possible. Then Chloe gave him this toy, saying that it would help find Shizuku. He noted that if he or Aquino ran, it would take too long. But Akane didn't understand his intentions and thought that they were hiding something. Chloe said that he had helped Haito fight strong opponents a couple of times before. He didn't know his true face, but he was sure that he was hiding something. And he was right. Their suddenly bursting balloons were proof of that, and it looked like he was now targeting Shizuka. Akane didn't agree with them, and didn't understand why they had to save her. Despite this, Chloe asked Hinata to do it, and in the meantime, they would take her out of the portal. Hinata asked him if he wasn't on Haito's side since he helped him. Chloe replied that he didn't care about the others because people thought he was a jerk and a bully and spread bad rumors about him. However, he has never been one to abandon his comrades in trouble so easily, so he asks Hinata for help. After that, Hinata rushed to look for Shizuku and, fortunately, made it in time. But Shizuku didn't understand why he was doing this and told him to run away because he could die at the hands of the monster. However, Hinata had no plans to leave, much less give up. Shizuku looked at this and wondered whether Hinata was either too stupid or overestimating his strength, and shouted at him to leave. But Hinata said that he would not run away and would fight to the end. He always regretted that day and asked himself why he didn't come back for her and Ren himself. He didn't know what happened back then, but from then on he noticed how Shizuku was relentlessly striving for power. Shizuku replied that it was true, and this is what it led to. Now she is exhausted and one step away from death. She also admitted that she was cruel, even to him, constantly neglecting. The others hated her too, saying they would stop going to school just because of her presence. Hinata to be a thorn in her side, and therefore believed that she deserved to die like that. But he replied that this was not so, and no matter how badly others spoke about her, he did not care. Because the Shizuku he knows has always been, and will always be, a person who cares about those around her. Just like she had always helped him since their early childhood. And then I secretly watched as he trained and became stronger. So no matter what, for him, Shizuku will always remain a good person. His words touched Shizuku, and she felt even more ashamed of everything she had done. Meanwhile, Hinata continued to try to defeat the monster, thinking that he could do it without difficulty. He managed to get close and strike, but it wasn't enough. The monster attacked back, throwing Hinata as far away from itself as possible. Hinata realized that this was not enough, and the time had come to use that very decisive blow that he used in Inashi's portal. However, this required time, effort, and tremendous endurance. But Hinata was willing to sacrifice it. To deliver the most powerful blow possible, he needed to accumulate maximum force by pushing off the ground faster and faster. Using acceleration, he had to accelerate all his power and then strike straight at the monster. And he succeeded. Hinata was able to accumulate and concentrate a huge amount of power. He charged at the monster, and Shizuku thought he was going to die. But she was shocked to see what Hinata had become. With a powerful blow, he pierced the monster through and through, leaving a huge hole in its body, thereby defeating it and saving his friend. A powerful explosion formed in place of the monster. This is all that remained of it after Hinata's strike. As expected, such an attack was very draining, even though Hinata had improved his basic skills. Shizuku couldn't believe what she saw, thinking that perhaps she was mistaken. And it all started on the very day when their school was attacked by monsters. The day of a great catastrophe. Then Shizuku took on the role of leader and ordered the children to quickly turn over their desks and barricade themselves. They managed to build a small wall to protect themselves from the monsters. Shizuku told the others not to move or make any unnecessary noise under any circumstances. And some didn't understand why they couldn't just up and run away as quickly as possible. Shizuku explained to them that these monsters only react to movement, so it was better for them to sit there in silence. She also noted that these monsters have poor eyesight and learned about this from books. However, the girl found this strange because she didn't have any artifact for battle, so why would she know about such a thing? Rin doubted her plan, but she was still more inclined to think that they should run away as quickly as possible. But Shizuku convinced her, saying that it was better to wait because someone should come for them. At some point, one of the monsters noticed them and began to dismantle the barricade. One of the girls got very scared and ran wherever her eyes looked. The monster immediately reacted and rushed at her, but Shizuku jumped on it and saved her classmate. Despite her request that no one move, everyone rushed to the exit. At that moment, the creature grabbed Shizuku, and she thought that she was about to die. However, the monster threw her, and she fell right into the running girls. Shizuku continued to shout at the others not to move, otherwise they would not survive. But one of the girls kicked her under the monster's feet in order to escape with her friend. Shizuku felt like it was all over for her, and the monsters were about to kill her. However, at the moment she was attacked, Rin jumped in front of the attack, saving her friend. Shizuku couldn't believe that one of her best friends had died right before her eyes. While the other children ran away, she was in a state of shock and couldn't even move. She didn't understand why Rin did this, but she asked her to promise to become stronger and someday kill all the monsters from the other world. At that time, Shizuku didn't know whose fault it was for what happened. Perhaps those who ran away. But then she realized that everyone was desperately trying to survive, and she herself expected the same. So Shizuku decided that it was only her fault that she had hoped for help from people like them. And also in her weakness, because even now she turned out to be useless. Hinata asked if she was the one who said that weakness only hinders them. But back then, at school, it seemed like everyone was weak. So did she really mean to say that Ren was weak too? His words made her even more emotional, and she replied that this was not so. After all, in reality, neither Rin, nor he, nor Rin were ever weaklings. They continued to fight until the last, as long as they had strength left. Then Shizuku realized that she had been deeply mistaken all this time, and she felt sincerely sorry. However, Hinata said that they should hurry and get out of here, because he himself does not understand what is happening now. Shizuku was exhausted, lost her artifact, and could not move. Hinata understood everything, and told her to climb on his back so that they could get to the exit together. She asked if it would be difficult for him, since he had changed his suit again. Hinata replied that even so, he would still continue to protect her. Along the way, Shizuku admitted that she had been disappointed in him from the very beginning, without knowing why. Perhaps because she had high expectations, and she also thought he was a fool since he was always getting into fights. Hinata agreed, saying that she was right. He was just much more stubborn than she thought. Suddenly, a monster appeared in front of them, and in their condition, it would have been extremely difficult to deal with. But at that very moment, Mitsuru jumped out of the forest and killed the monster with one blow. Hinata and Shizuku were surprised, and at the same time glad that he arrived on time. Meanwhile, the Deldoras continued the evacuation, and fortunately, almost no one was injured. Hinata and Shizuku also got out of the portal, albeit with great difficulty. Chloe noted that they arrived just in time, as he had expected, since Hinata had not let him down. However, Hinata replied that he would still argue that they made it on time. Chloe didn't understand what he was talking about, and asked him again what he meant. Then Shizuku showed the artifact, which was now trapped in a cube, and it became clear to everyone. Chloe's fears were confirmed, and he understood why Haito hadn't fought back then. Shizuku thanked Chloe and Akino for their help, because without them, she would have already died. Chloe replied that everything was fine, especially since he himself was in her debt. Hinata and Shizuku returned from the portal, and Akane was alarmed when she didn't see Mitsuru with them. Hinata explained that he was okay, and thanks to Mitsuru, he and Shizuku were able to get out. He is currently in the medical bay, as he lost consciousness immediately after leaving. Subaru called him a bungler because he fainted as soon as he returned. But Hinata asked him not to talk about Mitsuru like that, because he was much stronger than he seemed. If it weren't for his power, it's unknown if they would have been able to get out of the portal alive. Hinata noted that Mitsuri was such a good guy that he almost cried. His artifact turned out to be so powerful that he was able to break the bracelets without any difficulty. Maho joined them and said that the relic of their club president was very powerful, but it could only be used for a short time. Hikari and Sherry also came with Maho, and they were glad to see that the boys were okay. Sherry noted that outside the dome, not many people were injured, thanks to the prompt action. The portal was located right where most of the Deldoras Guild was located. However, there were no exact reasons for what happened, and no one could determine them. It was only clear that such a precedent had never happened before. Hikari was happy to see Shizuku, saying that she had changed a lot since their last meeting and had become unusually strong. Shizuku thanked her, adding that after such a battle, she could use some rest. Sherry asked if Shizuku was planning to go to Nibelheim. This was true because she did not know how to return the artifact and believed that the answer could only be found there. Miss Sherry was surprised to learn that Haito was from Nibelheim, as that meant that the Thieves Guild had now infiltrated the academy as well. Shizuku said that they had completely different plans, and they themselves had no idea that everything would turn out this way. However, the only one who could have known this in advance was most likely Rin. Shizuku realized that since Rin could predict the future, she knew for sure that Hinata would come to save her. But even so, she didn't understand what exactly Rin had in mind. Only one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. Sherry also asked if the boys had managed to retrieve the weapon that Haito had used to take the relic. But unfortunately, Haito dropped it when he was attacked, and there was no time to look for it. Haito had managed to take the magical weapon with which he had stolen the artifact with him. However, if they find it, they will be able to quickly return the sealed artifacts. If everything goes well, Shizuku and Hinata will get their artifacts back. Hinata's artifact, Sherry was referring to the, quote, shield artifact that belonged to his father. And whether to use it or not is up to Hinata himself and no one else. Meanwhile, the internet continued to buzz with discussion about the incident, and many heard for the first time about an organization called Nibelheim. After the portal core was destroyed, it was immediately closed, and the military festival was, of course, cancelled. Hinata initially believed that Nibelheim was behind it, but something much stranger was going on. Nanashi noted that the portal had entered its second phase, and such incidents would continue to occur indefinitely in the future. Over time, increasingly dangerous portals will begin to appear, significantly more complex than those that came before. Hinata asked her how she knew this, but Nanashi replied that she couldn't say, because if she told, they would see it. And this made Hinata have even more questions. Meanwhile, Nanashi opened another portal, and Hinata received the key to the truth, allowing him to enter the test portal under the code word Veritas. Nanashi, without really explaining anything, said that there was almost no time left, and she would wait for him at the farthest point. When he gets to her, she will explain everything, and if it turns out to be true, he will then be able to find her. Until then, she will wait impatiently for him, and hope that she was not mistaken. The next morning, Hinata went to the academy and was surprised when he noticed Akane and Subaru in the crowd of students. The reason for this overcrowding was the emergence of many new internship programs. There was no official announcement yet, but new portals appeared one after another. Subaru noted that this was probably related to that incident at the festival. Mitsuri also joined them, saying that the requirements for interns had also become stricter. Akane asked if he was okay after what happened. He replied that there was no reason to worry, because this always happens to him after using the artifact. Hinata asked him what the new requirements were for trainees, and one of them was to be a mercenary without a guild. Subaru asked who this mercenary was and how that happened, and Akane reminded him that they had covered this in the school curriculum, but he, as usual, slept during classes. Akane explained that mercenaries are people with official permission to enter portals and can perform various tasks depending on their reputation. Requests to destroy portals come from the state, and they are mainly handled by members of large guilds. But the number of new portals has already exceeded the guild's capabilities. That's why students are now called mercenaries without guilds. Also, if they complete a C rank or higher portal destruction internship, they can receive official approval before graduation. Like he did. Hinata noticed that most of the requests came from the Phoenix Guild. Mitsuri replied that, in that case, they deal with most of the portals, which is not surprising since they are an S-rank guild. Hinata had her own scores to settle with the Phoenix Guild, namely Genji. He didn't understand how they had so many participants to handle so many requests at once. Shizuku's school life changed a lot. Her classmates started to discuss her right in front of her, reminding her every time that she could no longer use the artifact. They didn't understand why she hadn't dropped out yet. Couldn't she forget what it was like to be the best in her class? But among the crowd of haters, there were also those who treated her with understanding. Sachi tried to cheer her up so that she wouldn't be so sad, but this only irritated Shizuku. She tried to help and told her not to pay attention to the unpleasant words. Shizuku didn't understand why everyone had changed their minds about her so quickly, and asked Sachi if she also thought that this was her payment. Sachi was frank with her, saying that Shizuku rarely listens to others, and once she makes a decision, she doesn't back down. She has a really difficult personality, which makes her hard to get along with, and her condescending behavior is not the best, to say the least. But despite all this, she continues to work much harder than others. Sachi said that Shizuku, who was now sitting in front of her, looked like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. And such a Shizuku will never lose to anyone again, so there is no point in mocking her. Sachi added that if Shizuku returned her artifact, then she would definitely allow her to join her, as if parodying Shizuku herself. Chloe and Akino also remained by Shizuku's side, despite her losing her artifact. They talked about how if someone wants to join their team, their opinion matters too, because they are all one team. At this time, the Phoenix Guild was in full swing, and destroying portals became their main task. Genji couldn't stop laughing with joy, because while for some the opening of new portals is a disaster, for him it was a gold mine. Who would have thought that one day everything would turn out like this, and he would be able to earn millions just by clearing portals? However, this would not have happened if he had continued to act alone, so he formed an alliance with the boss of the Thieves Guild. So he owed his success to Magenta, the head of Nibelheim, even though he asked him to do without the fawning. Genji noted that even the weakest person can become useful if you give him a powerful artifact. He came up with a new way to make money. Take away powerful artifacts, like those from Sherry, and give them to the weak. And in case of death, simply take them back. When Genji first heard about the incident at the festival, he was very scared, but it was thanks to this incident that he would soon shine in a new way.